the presidency again. The AU Commission has taken note of US President Donald Trump's recent order imposing new travel restrictions from several countries, many in Africa. The White House says total bans were imposed on countries viewed as deficient in relation to screening and vetting, and thus pose a high risk to the U.S. Sudan, the DRC, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Iran, and Haiti are amongst the fully restricted list, while Burundi and Venezuela are on the partially restricted list. Restrictions will also apply, including for UN visas, government employees, and athletes that are traveling for sporting events, amongst others. Sean Bracepiece reports.
During President Trump's first term, he banned travelers from 7 majority Muslim countries, a ban that was repealed by former President Joe Biden in 2021. The White House says total bans were imposed on countries viewed as deficient in relation to screening and vetting, and thus determined to pose a very high risk to the United States. Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Iran, and Haiti are also on the fully restricted list, while Burundi and Venezuela are partially restricted. Various exceptions will also apply, including UN visas, government employees, and athletes traveling for sporting events, among others. Sherwin Ricepiece, SABC News, New York.
South Africa's Robben Island Museum will be suspending all tourist visits to the iconic site for just over 2 months as it undertakes renovations. Robben Island will host delegations from around the world as South Africa becomes the first African country to host the G20 later this year. The renovations are estimated to cost about close to $3.4 million. The chairperson of Robben Island Museum, Professor Seth Cooper, says all visitors who book tickets during the shutdown period will be refunded in full. He says the island needs to be restored to the standard expected by the World Heritage Organization, UNESCO.
Given that South Africa is host to the G20 in November, and you're aware that there are delegations that have been having bilaterals from different sectors from the beginning of the year, and these are continuing as we speak. We felt we should take advantage of the winter period to do a shutdown in order to effect these changes that are necessary, long overdue, and required to retain the tangible heritage in the way that UNESCO and all of you want it to be in.
Israel says its military has recovered the bodies of 2 Israelis who were killed on October 7, 2023. The 2 were murdered during the Hamas-led attack close to the Gaza border, the BBC's Barbara Platt-Asher reports.
Judy and Gadi Haggai were killed at their kibbutz during the October 7th attack, but their bodies have been held in Gaza until now. The military said they were recovered in a special joint operation with Israel's intelligence agency. Family members of the elderly couple welcomed their return for a proper burial, but said their hearts would not be whole until all of the hostages came home. The families of the captives lead a protest movement demanding an end to the war in exchange for their release. There are 56, only 20 of them believed to still be alive.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Lamine Yamal scored twice as Spain produced a superb display. This to beat France in a 9-goal thriller last night in the Nations League, while it will be Aryna Sabalenka up against Coco Gauff in the women's singles at the French Open. Details coming up at 6:30.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Let's take a moment to thank the Rise and Shine team, starting with our technical producer today is Ndoro Lutuli. Thanks to our producers, Hlengiwe Mabaso, Pumuzo Ramakadza, and Joey Likhodi. On news is Onele Nzinzi. On sports, Musubudi Makura. Economics news brought to you by Chandugo Ligege. And our social media, Queen is Talent Butelezi. Well, let's get into our Africa Roundup, which is what we do every day on Rise and Shine after the news. And we take a look at some stories making headlines in and around our continent that you may have missed, and also just seeing what we can expect in terms of developments in this new day and hopefully the weekend, I guess. We start with, of course, the former president of Zambia, President Edgar Lungu, whose tributes for his death continue to pour in. He died on Thursday at the age of 68. Lungu had been receiving specialized medical treatment in South Africa for an undisclosed illness. President of the Socialist Party of Zambia, Dr. Fred Membe, has more.
I've known His Excellency President Edgar Chagwa Lungu since 1978. So it's a period of almost 47 years. His main mission was to unite the opposition, because he was unhappy with the way the governance of the country was going. He was also unhappy with the way he was being treated and the way his family was treated. He was a man who cared about his family. He was a man who cared about his political party and his colleagues in the Patriotic Front. And he also cared about the country. He was a great Pan-Africanist.
US President Donald Trump has signed a new law proclaiming, a proclamation banning nationals from 12 new countries, and that's from entering the United States. And this decision, according to President Trump, is aimed at curbing terrorism and enhancing national security. And some of the affected African countries include Chad, Congo Republic, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Libya, Somalia, and Sudan.
Mr. President, on your new travel ban, why now? And if the Boulder attack was part of your reasoning, why not include Egypt on that list where the suspect is from?
Well, because Egypt has been a country that we deal with very closely. They have things under control. The countries that we have don't have things under control. And why now? I can say that it can't come soon enough, frankly. We want to keep bad people out of our country.
Chinese electric vehicle giant BYD is set to nearly triple its dealership network in South Africa by next year, aiming to boost its footprint in the country's fast-evolving auto market. The expansion comes amid intensifying competition in Africa's largest automotive market, where sales of new energy vehicles are on the rise, and fellow Chinese automakers GAC, Chery, and GWM are also gaining ground.
Steve Chang is the general manager of BYD South Africa, which currently consists of 13 dealerships.
By end of the year, we will have about 20 dealerships around the country. The aim is to expand that to about 30, 35 till next year. I always like to use the word grow the business organically.
The dealership expansion will help BYD become a better-known brand and capture more buyers across a country that is slowly transitioning to electrified vehicles.
South Africa is actually one of the most important automotive markets in the southern hemisphere of Africa, right? Southern Africa. It's probably the biggest market in the whole Africa. So it's a market that we have to look at it and see how we can develop the market.
British scientists say that the first bacteria that newborns are exposed to could play a crucial role in their long-term health. A new study suggests that certain beneficial microbes acquired during the natural birth process may cut the risk of severe lung infections in early childhood. Here's the BBC's James Gallagher with more.
We come out of the womb sterile, but that doesn't last for long. All the nooks and crannies of the human body soon become home to microbial life. In this study, scientists took stool samples from 1,000 newborns. Those first colonised by Bifidobacterium longum were half as likely to end up in hospital with a lung infection than those with different starter bacteria. It's the first time the way our microbial ecosystem forms has been shown to reduce infections. These latest findings could lead to the development of new therapies similar to a probiotic yogurt to give good bacteria to babies.
And that's how we come to the end of today's segment of the Africa Roundup.
The EU-African SME Summit. Join more than 200 change makers from June 19 to June 21 at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. It's where trade meets transformation. We are building Africa's future through AFCFTA, the EU's global gateway, and the power of small businesses. It's an opportunity to spark collaboration and unlock Africa's investment. Presented by the European Entrepreneurs, the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Shared Value Africa. This is a summit not to be missed. Register now at euafricasmesummit.eu. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
The United States has again vetoed a Security Council draft resolution demanding an immediate, unconditional and permanent ceasefire in Gaza, respected by all parties. Washington sought to explain that it believed that the draft, an effort that elected 10 members of the council, did not condemn Hamas, and that it did not complement ongoing US-led diplomatic efforts in the region to reach a new ceasefire for a hostage deal. Now, the other 14 council members, including the other 4 permanent members, voted in favour of what would have been a legally binding text. Sherwin Bryce-Pease reports that this latest blow undercutting council efforts comes amid a catastrophic humanitarian situation unfolding in Gaza, and what the UN Security General Antonio Guterres has described as the unthinkable loss of life in the enclave.
The draft resolution has not been adopted owing to the negative vote of a permanent member of the Council.
This was the 5th veto deployed by the United States since the October 7th Hamas attack in 2023 that led to Israel's ongoing offensive in Gaza, as Washington increasingly stands isolated in support of Israel's continued military action in the decimated and traumatized enclave. U.S. Ambassador ad interim Dorothy Shear.
Rather than push forward a resolution that unjustly rewards terrorism, undermines negotiations, and allows Tehran to continue fomenting instability, let's instead demand that Hamas surrender, disarm, and leave Gaza forever, for the sake of all the region's people. Moreover, we need to be perfectly clear. Performative actions in this council designed to draw a veto, as evidenced by the process of formulating this resolution, wherein there was no true negotiation, are harmful at a time when there is delicate diplomacy going on in the region to reach a ceasefire. Further, engaging in this performative process at a time when serious questions are being asked about the utility of the UN, its funding, and use of resources is shameful. This council should not be used in this way.
In addition to demanding an immediate and unconditional permanent ceasefire, the draft also demanded the immediate, dignified and unconditional release of all hostages held by Hamas and other groups, and the unconditional lifting of all restrictions on the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza, as well as the restoration of essential services. Algeria, representing both Africa and the Arab group, lauded the effort to pass a text by the elected 10, arguing that they stood with clarity, with conviction and courage, as the proud bearer of moral legitimacy. Ambassador Amar Benjamin.
14 out of 15 Security Council members. It was a message to the people of Palestine. You are not alone. You are not alone. And it was a message to the Israeli occupier. The world watched you. The shield of impunity, of immunity, must fall.
Several European countries that voted in favor of the draft also sharply criticized Hamas's heinous actions. while affirming their view that the group could not be part of the future solution or governance in Gaza. UK Ambassador Barbara Woodward.
The United Kingdom voted in favour of this resolution today because the intolerable situation in Gaza needs to end. We are determined to see an end to this war, secure the release of the hostages held by Hamas, and alleviate the catastrophic humanitarian situation for Palestinians in Gaza. This Israeli government's decisions to expand its military operations in Gaza and severely restrict aid are unjustifiable, disproportionate, and counterproductive.
Pakistan's envoy Asim Iftikhar Ahmed expressed his country's regret at the Council's latest failure.
We are appalled that this Council once again stands immobilized in the face of mass suffering, atrocity, and unfolding tragedy. The veto cast today sends an extremely dangerous message that the lives of over 2 million Palestinians, besieged, starved, and relentlessly bombarded, are dispensable. This will remain not only a moral stain on the conscience of this Council, but a fateful moment of political abdication that will reverberate for generations.
The draft resolution also expressed grave concerns over the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza, including the risk of famine, and reaffirmed the obligations of all parties to comply with international law. Listen to Chinese Ambassador Fu Kong.
The United States has once again abused its veto power, extinguishing the glimmer of hope for the people of Gaza and ruthlessly continuing to leave over 2 million people in darkness. It must face questioning from the international community. People cannot help but ask, where is fairness and justice? For more than 600 days, over 54,000 people in Gaza have lost their lives. Israel continues to escalate its offensive and blockade.
Palestine's envoy Riyad Mansour called the 14 votes in favor of the draft something formidable, while accusing Israel of committing war crimes. For his part, Israel's ambassador Danny Danon referred to the 14 votes in favor as choosing incorrectly, while thanking the United States for standing on the right side by refusing to legitimize what he called lies in the resolution. I'm Sherwin Bryce-Pease in New York.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Greenpeace Africa has demanded that global soft drinks maker Coca-Cola stop the use of plastic on World Environment Day. The environment advocacy group demonstrated outside Coca-Cola's offices in Johannesburg, South Africa, with a high-impact visual demonstration exposing one of the world's most recognizable brands and its contribution to global pollution. Tutongobeni has the story.
In its memorandum of demands to the global soft drinks maker, Greenpeace Africa has called on Coca-Cola to stop using plastic. The environment advocacy group demonstrated outside Coca-Cola's offices in Johannesburg, South Africa, to mark World Environment Day. This was through a high-impact visual demonstration exposing the brand as a contributor to global pollution. The creative activity aligns with the UN's 2025 World Environment Day focus on ending plastic pollution. Helen Dana, project lead Pan-African Plastics Project at Greenpeace Africa, says Coca-Cola has been named as the world's top most polluter for 6 years running from 2018 to 2023.
So today on World Environment Day, we are outside Coca-Cola's corporate office in Johannesburg, and the reason why we're here is because Coca-Cola has been named as the world's top most polluter for 6 years running, from 2018 to 2023. And Coca-Cola produces 120 billion throwaway plastics every year, and these plastics will end up in the environment, in the marine ecosystem, and having not just environmental impact but also impacts on our ill health.
Dana says Coca-Cola must stop using plastic, but to rather invest in refill and reuse models as negotiations for the use of plastic continue.
So we are telling Coca-Cola to cap plastic production and to invest in refill and reuse models, things like the glass bottles, the cans that we used to have before. And secondly, we are telling Coca-Cola to be a strong advocate of the Global Plastic Treaty, that is the negotiations that are ongoing. Coca-Cola is part of the business coalition, and so we want them to use their influential position to actually influence, but also advocate strongly for the Global Plastic Treaty. And this treaty, when agreed, will enable us to cap plastic production.
The Plastic Treaty is an international effort aimed at addressing plastic pollution through a legally binding agreement. In March 2022, the historic resolution was adopted at the UN Environment Assembly to develop this treaty, focusing on the entire life cycle of plastics from design to disposal. Dana says they're hoping they will return with a strong treaty after the meeting in Geneva, Switzerland later this year.
We are at the final stages of the negotiation, and we will be having the second round of the fifth meeting, that is INC 5.2 in Geneva in August. And we hope that by the time we leave Geneva, we will be coming back home with a strong treaty. The member states failed to agree last year in Busan because there were a few articles, one of them being production, that were very contentious. A number of the member states want to look at downstream measures, especially the big oil producers. They do not want to touch anything on production. But you see, we cannot have a waste management treaty. We need a treaty that will look at, capping plastic production. And as Greenpeace Africa, we are calling for at least a 75%, reduction in plastic production by the year 2040. And we want Coca-Cola to be part of that, one of the, corporates really strongly advocating for this.
Dana has made a heartfelt plea to corporates not to prioritize profits before people, especially as those marginalized, mostly in Africa, are impacted by this plastic pollution.
So corporates are putting profits before people and the planet, but they need to go beyond that, because this is not just for our environment. This is about the health of human beings, of ourselves, but also of future generations. So we are urging corporates to go beyond, business interests, to go beyond profits and look at the impacts, the long-term impacts of plastics, because plastic has been shown to have disproportionately, impacts on marginalized community. Most of this community lives in, global South, Africa being part of that.
The action concluded with activists attempting to deliver their demands directly to Coca-Cola's senior management, who failed to come outside, while the activists left a trophy for world's #1 polluter on Coca-Cola's doorstep. For Channel Africa News, I am Tutongo Beni in Johannesburg.
June is Youth Month in South Africa. Celebrate Africa's young voices with us. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
I'm Tami Ngubeni, anchor of Africa in Business on Channel Africa, bringing you the African perspective.
And I'm Ashraf Garda, host of the National Pulse on SAFM, leading the conversations.
We've joined forces to bring you in-depth, exclusive G20 developments as we count down to the much-awaited inaugural G20 summit in South Africa, November 2025.
Tune in every Thursday at 16:20 Central African Time as we explore how this first G20 in Africa impacts the continent, from trade and innovation to climate and development.
It's a powerful crossover between Channel Africa and SAFM
as we bring you the G20 through an African lens.
The G20 in Africa.
Global Summit.
An African voice.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
The Kingdom of Lesotho's Ministry of Trade and Industry is conducting a nationwide awareness campaign on its recently revived Insolvency Act of 2022. It says that this act aims to provide for an efficient rescue and discovery of financially distressed companies and individuals in a manner that balances the rights and the interests of all the stakeholders. Rapelang Khadebe has more.
many businesses and individuals find themselves in distress and often not fully informed of alternative rescue measures or procedures to follow should they need to wind down operations. The Ministry of Trade says seeking professional help early balances interests of all stakeholders involved.
This is a process where we encourage a company that is in a financial distress that is probably still viable, that there's an alternative to liquidation, as it has always been a well-known process that once there's a mountain of debts for a company, then the winding up process will lead into liquidation, which oftentimes leads to a huge loss for the company and also the creditors that may be involved and any other person who has interest on the company.
The Solvency Act applies to both companies and individuals facing challenging times.
We are guarding the interest of the directors and shareholders of a company. We are guarding the interest of the employees of a company. We are guarding the interest of the creditors as well. So we're saying, instead of opting for a quick, well-known process of liquidation, why not we sit down and try to rescue the business?
Mahabane says, as the ministry, their main interest is to see businesses avoiding the insolvency route, as it has proven harder to recover from. She says they are committed to assist both corporates and individuals in distress with necessary tools and technical expertise that can ultimately save them from insolvency. I'm Rapelang Khatebe for SABC News, Masegolo Lesotho.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Still to come on Rise and Shine, we have our news headlines with Onele Nzinzi, and then we'll get our updates in the world of sports and economics news. And if you've just joined us, well, a good morning to you. And you can get in touch with us on our social media platforms. We'd love to hear from you. At Channel Africa 1 is the handle across all those platforms.
Yeah, today in history, June the 6th, 1990. Now, Algeria had been independent for 30 years at this point, and it was only 3 decades after independence that it held its first multi-party local elections. Up until then, much like a few other countries on the continent, it had been a one-party state. So democracy came into Algeria for the first time on the June the 6th, well, multi-party democracy, dare I say. So that's what happened today in history in North Africa in particular. It's 6:30 Central African time, which means it's time for your news headlines with Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News headlines. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. The funeral details of the late former Zambian President Edgar Lungu will be announced in due course. His political party, the Patriotic Front, said in a statement that Lungu had been receiving specialized treatment in South Africa for an undisclosed illness. Political analyst Professor Lesiba Defo says the apartheid government in South Africa strategy to divide and rule has successfully given birth to the government of national unity. Over 50 main black-led political parties had registered to contest the national elections. And White House aide have scheduled a call between President Donald Trump and billionaire Tesla CEO Elon Musk in an effort to broker peace. This comes amid a public feud between the two after Musk stepped down from his role as Trump's advisor. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News headlines. The African perspective.
And now let's check in with what's happening in the world of sports. Good morning, Musubudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you so much, Asanda. Very good morning from the sports desk. Now, Lamine Yamal scored twice as Spain produced a superb display to beat France in a 9-goal thriller and set up a Nations League final with Portugal on Sunday. The 17-year-old Barcelona forward One of the contenders to win the Ballon d'Or for the best player in the world this season, helped his side into a 4-0 and then a 5-1 lead in Stuttgart last night. But they were nearly pegged back as France staged a thrilling fight back, scoring 3 times in the last 11 minutes in a desperate attempt to make the game go into extra time. But Spain held on and they will face Portugal in the final in Munich, Germany on Sunday, while France will take on Germany in Stuttgart in the third and fourth place playoff match on Saturday. On to this now. World number 1 Aryna Sabalenka moved a step closer to a maiden French Open title by taking out 4-time champion Iga Swiatek in a blockbuster semi-final last night. Sabalenka will meet second seed Coco Gauff in Saturday's showpiece after the American ruthlessly ended French wildcard Louis Boisson's incredible run. So the Belarusian Sabalenka earned a 7-6, 4-6 and a 6-love victory to end 5th seed Swiatek's 26-match winning run at the tournament. After a slow start on the Roland Garros clay, Poland's Swiatek fought back to level, but Sabalenka dominated a 22-minute deciding set. Sabalenka, whose 3 Grand Slam titles have all come on the hard courts, has never reached the French Open, a final before. Meanwhile, in the other semi-final, Gauff, who was a runner-up to Swiatek back in 2022, won 6-1 and 6-2 against the world number 361, Louis Boisson, who was appearing in her first ever Grand Slam main draw, despite also having the back of the crowd on centre court on Philippe Courtrier last night. The energy provided was not enough to compensate for Boisson's lack of quality on the day. Gauff dominated the rallies, breaking Boisson's serve 6 times before wrapping up victory in just 1 hour and 9 minutes on court. In rugby news now, participation in rugby for girls at the school level in South Africa has increased significantly, growing between 15 to 20% from 2023 to 2024. This bodes well for the future of the national side, who will be in action at the upcoming Rugby Africa Women's Cup of Nations in Madagascar. Now, the national team prepared for the Africa Cup in Johannesburg, taking on the men's team from the University of Johannesburg. A number of new players will also get the opportunity to showcase their skills as SA Rugby looks to increase the pool of players available for national selection. Now, Hannah Coleman, an experienced member of the current squad, has a first-hand experience on the rising interest in the sport.
It's potentially grown a lot. I see it every day. And even in our provincial competition that we played, like compared to when I first started playing the provincial compared to now, how much more competitive the game is gone. It's not just you jog onto the field and you know you're going to win the game. You actually really have to put in the shoulder and fight every single minute of the game.
Meanwhile, the assistant coach Franzel September says winning the upcoming tournament, that's of course the Africa Cup of Nations tournament in rugby, and building towards the Women's World Cup in England will go hand in hand.
I think it's important for us that we go there, we give everyone a proper chance to put a hand up for World Cup. So it's important for us that this Africa Cup, we need to go through this phase for some of the players. And as I said earlier in the week, we have 8 players that represented us in the previous World Cup, and it's their time now to play Africa Cup. So we look forward to seeing what they can do now.
And finally, in cricket news, India cricket coach Gautam Gambhir has criticised the decision to host the victory parade where 11 people died on Wednesday, and says his heart goes out for those affected. Now, dozens were injured outside the M. Swami Stadium as the Royal Challengers Bengaluru celebrated their Indian Premier League title victory this week. Now, Karnataka State Chief Minister Sidar Mai told reporters that authorities had not expected the number of people we heard turned out. Now, one police official told the BBC more than 200,000 people packed the streets to see the team parade through the streets to the stadium, but police expected half of that amount. An official also said a stampede occurred when people tried to push through a small gate. On Thursday, RCB said they would also give $12,000 to the families of those killed. That's a wrap from the Sports Desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. And join the conversation. Channel Africa, the African Perspective. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
And it's time now to take a first look at what's been happening in the world of business and economics, industry and commerce. And at the Business News Desk this morning, Chanduko Ligege. Good morning.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter, and good morning. South African Agriculture Minister John Steenhuisen says the country should push for meaningful participation of black businesses in the agriculture sector. He says it is unacceptable that so far in the country's democracy, only 10% of farmers are black. Steenhuisen was among cabinet ministers who delivered an address at the Black Business Council Summit in Kempton Park, east of Johannesburg.
It's obviously very important that as the agriculture space, we work with as many stakeholders as possible to ensure growth and opportunity in the agriculture space. If we look at the participation, particularly of black farmers in the large-scale commercial agriculture, pegs it at around 10% on average, obviously much better in some commodity groups and much worse in others. And obviously we need to look at how we can address that imbalance that we have and obviously create and grow the power for more South Africans.
The Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, expects South Africa's economy to grow by 1.3% this year as a weaker global outlook, domestic logistics challenges and higher borrowing costs persist. The OECD notes that while the country has good growth potential, low public investment and the high cost of doing business is holding back the country's economic growth. Louis Di Mello of the OECD says South Africa's regulatory system is an impediment to job creation.
Restrictive regulations make it harder for firms to enter the formal market and expand, creating jobs in the process. This is especially true for small and medium-sized enterprises, which employ the lion's share of the labor force in South Africa. Making it easier for firms to obtain licenses and to participate in public procurement are just 2 examples of areas where regulatory reform could help the performance of labor markets.
Meanwhile, South Africa's Deputy Finance Minister Asho Sarupan says government has noted the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development OECD's recommendations to introduce stricter spending controls, improve governance and administrative efficiency. Speaking at the launch of the OECD's Economic Survey of South Africa in Johannesburg, Sarupan acknowledged the body's recommendation to reform state-owned entities in order to reduce fiscal transfers. He emphasized that government is currently consulting on options for a formal fiscal anchor to prevent the cycle of high spending, large deficits and rising debt.
So we find strong alignment between our reform agenda and the OECD survey's 5 priority recommendations for South Africa, which includes enhancing fiscal sustainability while promoting inclusive growth, maintaining low and stable inflation, expanding job creation and workforce integration, and enabling a just climate transition and informing the electricity sector. We do note the OECD's recommendation to introduce stricter spending controls, reinforce spending rules, and improve governance.
The Africa Finance Corporation says African governments should turn to an estimated $4 trillion in capital held by domestic institutions like pension funds to develop much needed local infrastructure as external funding sources wane. Building railways and expanding power generation are major priorities for the continent as its population and economies grow. In the report, the Finance Corporation says higher interest rates globally, declining donor budgets, and protectionist policies in advanced economies are further tightening the availability of funds. Chinese President Xi Jinping has had a telephonic conversation with U.S. President Donald Trump. The phone talks were at Trump's request without providing further details about the leaders' conversation. The White House did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The highly anticipated call comes amid accusations between Washington and Beijing in recent weeks over critical mineral dispute that threatens to tear up a fragile truce in the trade war between the two biggest economies. Let's have a look at financial indicators this hour. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 567, Botswana 13.25, Kenya the dollar is at 128 shilling 539, Zambia 26 kwacha 6. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 61, Russia 78 ruble 64, India 85 rupee 83, China 7 yuan 18, South Africa 17 rand 62 cents. $1 is 73 pence to the British pound and 87 to the euro. Commodities, gold is at $3,366, platinum at $1,148 per ounce, the price of Brent crude oil at $65.12 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Embrace our young voices this month. Channel Africa, celebrating Youth Month. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
Let's get into our G20 fact for this Friday, the 6th of June. Did you know that South Africa has proposed the establishment of a cost of capital commission during its G20 presidency? This commission will deliver a comprehensive expert review on the issues impacting the cost of capital for developing economies, which could help address future debt sustainability issues and the related fiscal space challenges. That's our G20 fact for this Friday.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
Hi, I'm Tammy Ngubeni, anchor of Africa in Business on Channel Africa, bringing you the African perspective.
And I'm Ashraf Garda, host of the National Pulse on SAFM, leading the conversations.
We've joined forces to bring you in-depth, exclusive G20 developments as we count down to the much-awaited inaugural G20 Summit in South Africa, November 2025.
Tune in every Thursday at 16:20 Central African Time as we explore how this first G20 in Africa impacts the continent from trade and innovation to climate and development.
It's a powerful crossover between Channel Africa and SAFM
as we bring you the G20 through an African lens.
The G20 in Africa.
Global Summit.
An African voice.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
In the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial in South Africa, the defense has objected to questions based on newly submitted photographs presented by State Prosecutor Advocate George Baloyi. Now, this comes as the defense paused its cross-examination of lead investigator Brigadier Bongani Gininda, pending further evidence that has been requested. 5 men are on trial for the 2014 murder of Meyiwa, who was the captain of South Africa's national men's football team known as Bafana Bafana. Paul Magubane has more.
Defense counsel Charles Mnisi says he has concluded the cross-examination of Brigadier Geninda. However, this is subject to pending documents he requires from the state. Advocate Mnisi says he is still waiting for the vehicle tracker information of the officers who were present when Muzi Sibiya was arrested. Mnisi is also waiting for a date when the court can go on inspection in loco of one of the locations Sibiya alleges he was assaulted.
Thank you, my lord. Brigadier, indeed, that will conclude my cross-examination on behalf of accused number 1, as it has been pending for some time. However, it is on the right that there is still some information that we requested relating to the AVL of the Morovia Haikers, whose response we have not yet received. We're looking forward to receiving that information. But thank you. We'll be waiting to hear the arrangements that have been made for the court to visit, to have an inspection in loco on that disputed area where allegedly Mr. Sibiya was taken to and assaulted.
Despite this, the state has commenced with the re-examination of Brigadier Geninda's evidence-in-chief. State Prosecutor George Baloyi asked why key witness Sifiso Gwabini Zungu did not testify in court. Key state witness Constable Sizwe Zungu testified that he went to visit Gwabini at the Basotho hostel the day Meyiwa was murdered. This is where he alleges he saw all the 5 accused. Brigadier Geninda says due to fear of being assassinated, Gwabini could not be called to the stand.
Reference was made to a witness by the name of Mr. Sifiso Zungu. Sifiso Zungu his other name is Gwabini. That is correct. Now, it was put to you that he didn't testify in these proceedings and that what he says is hearsay evidence. Now, do you know as to why he did not testify in these proceedings?
Yes, I do, my lord.
Yes.
I'm going to say it with utmost respect, my lord, but I'll say it as it is. During the consultation with the state, he indicated that he was fearful of his life, of a possible assassination.
However, Advocate Mnisi says this is new evidence being introduced by the state.
I perceive that to be new evidence, and I'm going to request to be afforded the indulgence to further cross-examine this witness on that very same aspect, on the reason why Gwabini has not come to testify, because he has referred extensively to Mr. Gwabini, and when I said to him he has not yet testified, that would have been an opportunity for the witness to tell this court why. But now this,
Therefore, you're entitled to, if it's new evidence, you're entitled to cross-examine.
As it please the court.
Mr. Baloyi is an experienced prosecutor, he knows the law.
Thank you.
This is by all means, my lord.
Meanwhile, the defense has also objected to Baloyi questioning Geninda about additional photos said to be retrieved from a phone belonging to accused number 3, Mthobisi Mncube, claiming they did not form part of the original evidence bundle. The trial is expected to continue Friday morning. Paul Makubane, SABC News.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres says keeping the two-state solution alive for both Palestine and Israel was absolutely essential, suggesting that a one-state solution with diminished Palestinian rights was totally unacceptable. The UN chief was speaking to journalists as he paid tribute to the 168 UN personnel killed in 2024, including 126 staff killed in Gaza, all of whom served under the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, or UNRWA. Guterres called it the highest staff death toll in the United Nations history and said the organization would not accept the killing of humanitarians, journalists, medical workers, or civilians as the new normal anywhere and under any circumstances. Sherwin Bryce-Peace reports.
Mourning those lost in the line of duty, a memorial to their lives and sacrifice in the name of humanity. Listen to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres.
The sacrifice of all 168 of our fallen colleagues everywhere, humanitarians, peacekeepers, peacemakers, is a tragedy. It is also a reminder of the responsibility carried by every UN staff member every single day. And that's important for all the world to see. Because as we mourn those lost, we must also recognize the living, the thousands of UN personnel who serve around the world today, carrying out the missions entrusted to them by the countries that make up these United Nations. They do not seek recognition, they seek to make a difference.
With a heavy and rising death toll in Gaza and the West Bank, and a two-state solution increasingly in peril, the UN chief was asked for his message to world leaders ahead of an upcoming 4-day UN conference to address the two-state solution from June 17th.
My message to world leaders and delegations is that it is absolutely essential to keep alive the two-state solution perspective, with all the terrible things we are witnessing in Gaza and in the West Bank. And for those that doubt about the two-state solutions, I ask, what is the alternative? Is it a one-state solution in which either the Palestinians are expelled or the Palestinians will be forced to live in their land without rights? That would be totally unacceptable. I firmly believe that it is the duty of the international community to do everything to keep the two-state solution alive and then to materialize the conditions to make it happen.
And after Wednesday's failed effort in the Security Council to demand an immediate and permanent ceasefire and the immediate and dignified release of all hostages, due to yet another United States veto, despite 14 of the 15 members voting in favor of the draft, Guterres said this.
We will do everything we can, but it is clear that we can only be effective in supporting the people in Gaza if there is a permanent ceasefire, if there is the unconditional and immediate release of all hostages, and if there is unlimited access for humanitarian aid. We have seen in the past pause, in the past ceasefire, how it was possible to mobilize massive humanitarian aid for the people in Gaza. We need that to happen again, and we need that to happen permanently. We are always disappointed when ceasefire does not materialize, releases are not hostages, and humanitarian aid is not distributed, or is distributed in a way that puts at risk the life of so many Palestinians.
All this in challenging times for international cooperation and where multilateralism is straining to deliver positive shifts where it's needed the most, and despite too many continuing to pay the ultimate price. I'm Sherwin Bryce-Peace in New York.
Africa at Play with NATO NETO chairman.
The Confederation of African Athletics CAA President Mr. Hamad Kalkaba Malboum talk to us about the state of athletics in Africa as it stands and what picture are you looking at 5 years later?
Yeah, athletics in Africa is strong. We are able to organize our major events in time. Like this year, we will have the under-20 and under-18 African Championship in Nigeria. Next year, we will have the senior in Ghana. In 2027, we will go back to Algeria to organize the under-18 and under-20. And then 2028, we will have the senior championship in Gaborone in Botswana. Well, by this program, we can increase our performance. And at the same time, we are considering the fact that within the British Federation, they are identifying young talent every year within the national program, within the scholarship championship. And so the athletics in Africa is in good standard.
Live every Saturday and Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. Central African Time. Got something to say? Are you passionate about issues that matter? Do you have a voice that deserves to be heard? Well, we've got the perfect platform for you. Call in or drop us a WhatsApp on +27 63 406 9126 and we will call you back so you could have your say and be part of the conversation.
30 years of age. I just turned 30 on the 15th of November. So that's who I am,
It's not just talk, it's your chance to air your views, share your opinion, engage with the community that values your perspective. Follow us on our social media. Visit our website at www.channelafrica.co.za and get ready to share your views on Channel Africa, the African perspective. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
If you've just joined us on African Rise and Shine, well, thanks for doing just that, and do stay with us on Channel Africa. More to come in the next 2 hours of the show. And on the 6th of June, if it is your birthday, a happy birthday to you. I actually know someone who was born today, a friend of mine from high school. You share your birthday, some famous birthdays. Tony Yeboah, who is a Ghanaian soccer player, a striker with 59 caps, played for clubs like Leeds United, Hamburger and Eintracht Frankfurt, born this day in 1966. You also share a birthday with Bjorn Borg, who's a Swedish tennis player, born in 1956, French Open and Wimbledon multi-champion, that one is. And then also Daniel Chapo, the president of Mozambique, was born on this day, lawyer and politician. He was born back in 1977 on June 6, which somebody who we'll be talking about actually in the next hour. That's one of the stories that are coming up, because President Daniel Chapo has arrived in Malawi. He got there yesterday, marking the start of a 2-day state visit. This is aimed at reinforcing diplomatic and economic ties between Malawi and Mozambique. So that's what's to look forward to in the coming hour. Of course, that and more stories.
And going back on this day in history, 1986 in South Africa, well, the country was plunged into a new era of repression because the apartheid regime declared a nationwide state of emergency, and it was one of the harshest crackdowns in the country's history, giving security forces sweeping powers to detain people without trial, ban political activity, and censor the media. So that was 1986, but it took a full 8 further years for there to have democracy to come to South Africa. So it was a really difficult and challenging time for the people of South Africa at that time. And those that are old enough will remember just how things started to intensify. And I believe that in the last 4 years before the transition to democracy, so 1990 to 1994, more people died of political violence just in those 4 years than the entire time of apartheid before that. That's how dangerous that period of time was. And it was quite a thing to witness eventually. The eventual peace, the eventual exhalation, and voting for the first time. It was quite a thing.
Yeah, well, let's say good morning to Oneli Nsinsi with our news, and after her will be Musibudi Makura with sports headlines. We get into the next hour now of Rise and Shine. It's 7 o'clock Central African Time.
SABC News, the African perspective.
Well, thank you, Asanda. The funeral details of the late former Zambian President Edgar Lungu will be announced in due course. Lungu died yesterday at the age of 68. His political party, the Patriotic Front, said in a statement that Lungu had been receiving specialized treatment in South Africa for an undisclosed illness. He led Zambia for 6 years from 2015, losing the election to the current president, Hakainde Hichilema, by a large margin. After that defeat, he stepped back from politics, but later returned to the fray and appeared to have ambitions to run for presidency again. Meanwhile, South Africa's Economic Freedom Fighters Party has expressed its condolences to the people of Zambia following the death of the country's former president Edgar Lungu. Lungu rose from humble beginnings on the Copper Belt to become a lawyer, military officer, and then president between 2015 and 2021. Kailihle Kumalo reports.
The EFF says during his tenure, President Edgar Lungu made significant strides in strengthening Zambia's international relations and promoting unity across political divides. It says Lungu introduced policy initiatives aimed at diversifying Zambia's economy beyond its reliance on copper and appointed Zambia's first female vice president, Inonge Wina. But the EFF adds that the former Zambian leader's time in office was not without criticism. His administration was marked by concerns of a rise in public debts, the use of emergency powers during times of unrest, and passage of legislation seen as restricting civil liberties.
Political analyst Professor Lesiba Defo says the apartheid government in South Africa's strategy of divide and rule has successively given birth to the government of national unity. Over 50 mainly black-led political parties had registered to contest the national elections, with only 18 of them having made it to the National Assembly. Some of the parties secured funding from rich business people at home and abroad. Professor Defo says this was a strategic and deliberate move meant to divide the black vote in the May 29 elections last year.
The strategy of divide and rule has been with African politics for a long time. If you really want to manage a black man, find a mechanism to divide them so that they are not united. If you want to extract the mineral resources, sometimes even the intellectual capital of Africa, get them forever divided, because in unity there is strength. And that has been with us for 70 years of our independence. Capitalism thrives where there is instability. Allow me to say, whites are more richer today, more politically emboldened than they were in 1994 because the natives could not unite.
Legal analyst Melusi Qulu says improved communication channels between South Africa and Malawi could help to settle the dispute over the attempt to extradite Shepherd Bushiri back to South Africa in order to stand trial. The fugitive pastor and his wife Mary have approached the Malawian High Court to challenge the ruling that ordered their extradition to South Africa. In March, the chief resident magistrate in Lilongwe ruled in favor of the National Prosecuting Authority for the couple to face charges in Pretoria. The Bushiris face charges including fraud and money laundering. Rolo believes there's a political standoff between the two countries.
There's certain extraditions that we try to do and we fail at them, but also involve the country, which is the requested country, to get the accused back to the country where he's accused of crimes that he has. So what we should do is to involve Malawi in the process. But what I'm sensing from a political standpoint, the Malawian government might not really want to work with the South Africans, because remember when he was first arrested and then he went back to Malawi, there was an interview where a certain minister said, but you are the guys who let the Bushiri escape from the country. So there's this sense that I'm getting that there's no unity when it comes to that.
Lastly, White House aides have scheduled a call between President Donald Trump and billionaire Tesla CEO Elon Musk in an effort to broker peace. This comes amid a public feud between the two after Musk stepped down from his role as Trump's advisor. Musk had backed a call for Trump's impeachment and suggested without evidence that the president appears in government's unreleased files on the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. In response, Trump has threatened to revoke government contracts with Musk companies. Some Americans have these reactions.
It's not going to be something that's just going to get resolved, like swept under the rug. I think it's two egos going at it.
It looks like a lot of petty fighting, a lot of male hubris, just out on display.
I mean, the odds of actually guessing what's going to come next has never been as weird as now. Yeah. I don't think our country's ever experienced this exact circumstances.
For news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Ntsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news, Sawa Bafana will face off with Taifa Stars of Tanzania in an international friendly match today in Polokwane in the Limpopo province, while I will get to see the men's semi-finals at Roland Garros later on tonight, with two players vying, of course, to make it into the final of the second Grand Slam tournament of the year. Details coming up at the bottom of the hour.
Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
Former Zambian President Edgar Lungu passed away yesterday. He'd been receiving specialized treatment in South Africa. Lungu died at Mediclinic Mediforum, a hospital in Pretoria here in South Africa. He was the 6th president of Zambia between 2015 and 2021, when he lost the election to current President Hakainde Hichilema. Bonolo Maribe has more for us.
Edgar Changwa Lungu was born on the 11th of November 1956. He was Zambia's 6th president. Lungu took a full presidential term in 2016 after defeating opposition leader Hakainde Hichilema at the time. Prior to that, he had served as Lusaka's Justice and Defense Minister under the ticket of his party, the Patriotic Front. Lungu's daughter, Tasila, says the family is distraught by his passing.
Fellow Zambians, it is with profound sorrow that we announce the passing of His Excellency, Dr. Edgar Changwa Lungu, 6th President of the Republic of Zambia, who departed this morning at 06 hours at Mediforum Clinic, a center in South Africa. My father, President Lungu, had been under medical supervision in recent weeks. His condition was managed with dignity and privacy, with support from all well-wishers. In this moment of grief, we invoke the spirit of one Zambia, one nation.
Lungu was no stranger to the political office. He acted as Zambia's president after the hospitalization of the late former president, Michael Sata. In 2021, Lungu was defeated by the current president of Zambia, Hichilema. Presidential spokesperson Vincent Magwenya says that the South African government extends its condolences to the people of Zambia.
President Ramaphosa has learned with sadness of the passing of former president of Zambia, President Edgar Lungu. The president offers his condolences to President Lungu's family, friends, and the people of Zambia. President Lungu has been receiving medical care here in South Africa for an extended period. Government, the Lungu family, and the Zambian High Commission will undertake the necessary processes to give effect to the wishes of the Lungu family. May President Lungu's soul rest in peace.
Leader of the opposition party, Zambia Must Prosper, Calvin Fube Bwalya, says the country has lost a giant.
It is with a very heavy heart that we have received the sad news of the passing on of our beloved 6th Republican President of the Republic of Zambia, Dr. Edgar Changwa Lungu. We believed and prayed that Dr. Lungu will go through his medical checkups and indeed his operations if need be and return to Zambia. But God Almighty knew why this did not happen.
Lungu had hinted plans to come back to active politics. Details and funeral arrangements are yet to be announced by the Zambian authorities. I'm Bonolo Maribe, SABC News.
Annika Longi sur Channel Africa.
Nous allons danser au son de Haya, que je dédicace à vous tous, chers auditeurs, qui êtes en train de suivre cette émission Mix Vibration. N'oubliez pas, vous pouvez nous suivre à partir de l'application SABC+. Vous choisissez Channel Africa pour suivre l'émission en direct. Nous allons danser au son de Haya.
Annika Longi, tous les dimanches sur Mix Vibration.
Zochitika ndi Madaphiri.
kamlondola wazochitika pena paliponse.
Nduna wa zamalonda ku Malawi waletsa kampani yopanga shuga ya Irovo yomwe ndi nthambi ya Irovo Sugar Group Limited kuti isiye kutumiza shuga kumaiko akunja. Malingana ndi nduna ya zamalonda Vitumbuko Mumba, izi zithandiza kuti shuga yemwe yakusowa pamsika azipezeka. Ndiye pano ndili ndi George Muhangu amene ali mu mzinda wa Blantyre mu dziko la Malawi. Chimene chikupangitsa kuti shuga azisowa ndi chani?
Chomwe chikupangitsa kuti shuga azisowa ndichonena kuti panopo ili ngati off season ya makampani a Irovo Sugar Malawi, kunena kuti sakutha kupanga shugayi okwanira chifukwa akukolola. Ndiye akamaliza kukolola pameneno atayambeno sopano kugaya shugayi kuti azipezeka. Chinanso ndichonena kuti ma distributors amene akumakagula shuga kaya ndi ku Irovo kaya ndi kusalima shuga akumagulisa ku maiko akunja ngati Zambia, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Mozambique.
Zochitika ndi madaphiri lolemba mpaka lachisanu pa nthawi ya 7 koloko kufikira 8 koloko madzulo pa Channel Africa.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
So, understandably, today Zambians are in mourning of the passing of their 6th president, Edgar Lungu, who died in a Pretoria hospital at the age of 68, and he was undergoing medical treatment. We're not quite sure what he was ill with, but what I know for sure is that it wasn't the first time he'd been visited a hospital in South Africa. He had gone a few times before that, and we've reported on that several times. So perhaps this was something that he had been dealing with for a number of years now. He was the president of the country between 2015 and 2021, and that was a period of time that was marked by significant political and economic shifts. And after leaving office, he remained an active and often outspoken figure with the Patriotic Front maintaining a visible presence in Zambian political discourse. President Hakainde Hichilema has called for unity during this period of national reflection. Well, to help us look back on Edgar Lungu's political legacy and his impact in Zambia's development, we're now joined by Zambian political analyst and historian, Dr. Houston Chiputa. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
I appreciate.
I suppose legacy is going to be something that comes up quite a bit this week as people start to reflect on the life and times and contribution that former President, late President Edgar Lungu did for Zambia. What would you say from your viewpoint might be his legacy?
Well, I think President Lungu's legacy, one can say, could stem from the fact that initially he started off as someone who had not even an inkling of that he would be the next president after the death of President Michael Sata in 2014. But he was shoved into the fray and eventually became president, and therefore he took on the mantle of leadership. And from the word go, he said he would continue implementing the programs that Michael Sata had left. And I think true to his word, a lot of the programs that were implemented under his rule, 7 years of being president of Zambia, President Edgar Lungu fulfilled many of those that had already started, and others that had been embryonic, but were later, particularly in terms of infrastructure development. I think many people still remember President Lungu as having done a great deal in terms of decongesting Lusaka by building flyover bridges, but also in education, building schools, building hospitals, building clinics. And of course, when he left power, some of those were still being built, including the construction of extra hostel bed spaces in universities, though many of those remained incomplete, and they are still incomplete up to now. So the present government picked them up and is now trying to see that they can complete them.
But it came at a great cost, though, didn't it? I mean, debt soared, and some might even say because of the failure to pay repayments of international loans that the country actually became somewhat bankrupt under his tenure. What does that tell us about the way he led? Maybe his heart was in the right place, but perhaps wasn't quite fully aware of the consequences of some of his actions.
Well, perhaps one would say to some extent they must have gotten carried away with particularly the loans that were coming from China, because a lot of the infrastructure projects were built using loans from China. But suffice to say that some of the money had already been borrowed from the Paris Club members by Michael Sata, believing that with the increasing copper production, increasing copper prices, Zambia would raise enough resources to be able to repay those loans. But that was not to be, because, as you have rightly said, indeed, in 2020, we were unable to continue repaying the loans and defaulted. And I think we were about the first country in Africa to default on those loans repayments, which the current government had a lot of challenges in renegotiating. So yes, perhaps one would say people got carried away and thought that they could shine, they could make infrastructure projects, they could do all these other things on borrowed money without realizing that they needed a plan of how to repay those loans, which plan I think was not there.
When he eventually left office, I mean, he lost the election to Hakainde Hichilema by quite a huge margin, which was quite a statement by the Zambian public. What were they telling him in voting against him in such numbers?
Well, the 1 million plus votes that President Hakainde Hichilema got over former President Edgar Lungu was indeed a great stamp in endorsing HH as a particularly huge shift from the way Edgar Lungu had led Zambia. Though most Zambians were happy that some of that money literally was being spent on subsidizing the living conditions of the people, to the extent that people got used into thinking that life could be easy, and yet we were living on borrowed money and borrowed time. And so in the process, a lot of things went wrong. But also bear in mind the fact that one key area where President Lungu did not make a major mark was the kind of violence that was being perpetrated by the party youths in urban areas, in rural areas, in various parts of the country, which literally scared people, because some, it is said, were moving around with pangas, machetes, and threatening people at bus stations, in markets, extorting money, and doing many other things. And so that was a huge setback on the part of President Lungu. In spite of people telling the Patriotic Front then and the President Lungu that was going to cost them the election, they thought they were loved by the people and they would win. And so surprisingly, they were shocked and they were evicted from power by the people.
As Hakainde Hichilema himself will testify, some would say that democracy took quite a knock, with opposition figures being arrested, restrictions on institutions such as the press. Why do you think he led with such a heavy hand towards the end?
You mean President Lungu?
Yes.
Well, you see, in African politics, usually our leaderships in many countries, no matter how democratic we are not, there's a very thin line between how we understand chieftainship and how we understand democratic governance. Oftentimes when leaders are challenged on the democratic plane, they quickly switch to the authoritarian style of leadership that you see, or that you saw historically in chieftainships. So they revert to that as a means of wanting to push their agenda forward by shutting down the opposition. But in the process, it grows the animosity of the citizens, because they are met in crossfire and they are made to suffer. And so in the process, they wait for their time to vote. And in that case, they indeed waited for 12th August 2021, and they voted out the Patriotic Front and brought in the United Party for National Development of Hakainde Hichilema.
So perhaps as the day of his funeral comes closer and closer, how do you think Zambians will remember him?
Well, I think they will remember him on both planes in terms of someone who tried his best to keep the cost of living quite low. Though the majority want to understand that that was done at great cost because those were highly subsidized prices. But unfortunately, the subsidies were not made on Zambian money, but on borrowed money. So those who don't understand always talk about his cost of living having been lower than the current cost of living in Zambia because they don't appreciate that that was being done on borrowed money. Others remember him, of course, on the various infrastructure projects that were implemented, and because of that, many have nostalgic remembrance of President Lungu, and so in the process, we have mixed feelings. Those who remember him as having been someone who did a lot for the country, and those who remember him as having unleashed some form of terror, particularly through the party youths called the cadres, and so it's a mixed grill.
All right, and that's where we're going to have to leave it. But thank you so much indeed for sharing your thoughts on how people might remember former President Edgar Lungu.
I appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you. That's Dr. Houston Chiputa, Zambian political analyst and historian, helping us unpack the legacy of Edgar Lungu, which appears quite mixed.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
As Youth Month gets underway in South Africa, a new report has raised the alarm over rising debt among young people in the country. According to the latest credit stress report by AT20, 40% of all credit defaulters in the country are under the age of 35. Most of their debt is made up of risky, unsecured loans, despite young people holding just 17% of total credit. For more on this, we're joined on the line by Samantha Moyana, who is debt counselor at the National Debt Advisors. Samantha, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Rise and Shine.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
We appreciate you making time. At 80/20 report shows that 40% of credit defaulters are under the age of 35. What are some of the key factors driving South Africans into debt so early in life?
Young people today face numerous financial challenges that can impact their financial stability. They often struggle with debt, including student loans, credit card, and other forms of borrowing due to lack of knowledge about finance or investing or even managing their debt, making it difficult for them to make informed decisions when it comes to managing their debt or accounts.
What is it about unsecured loans that makes it attractive to young people? Because they are considered high risk. Why are they so common amongst this age group?
To be honest, it's because it's easy accessible. You know, getting a clothing account, getting a personal loan is one of the easiest accounts or the first accounts that one can actually qualify for before you can actually qualify for the secured ones. And you know, youngsters nowadays, they're all about clothing. They're all about fancy things. So those unsecured debt is what they take out in order to purchase those items that they would want.
And you mentioned financial education is something that is lacking. So how do we make sure that this becomes something that is the norm, that young people do get financial education where necessary?
It is important for youngsters to be educated. Hence why those financial advisors, they are us who are debt counselors. When young people do take out certain accounts, that consultant should be at least responsible to educate that person more about their account they want to take out, inform them about the interest rate and other charges that are associated with that debt. With educating the youngsters, it will curb a lot of them from finding themselves in this financial debt crisis.
At what stage in life would you say this financial literacy needs to begin in order to prove effective?
It's very important. They should already implement it in high school or even primary. Start teaching children from a young age. There's no need for you to use those fancy word or vocabularies. Start using the word saving. Save the little money, your pocket money that your mother gives to you. That's how you can actually educate and instill that into young children. And then they can also grow up with that habit into their older days or older age group.
And what would your advice be to parents then who are thinking, how do I teach my children, if we're saying we're starting as early as even primary school, to learn about money and financial know-how?
As parents, that most of them would give their children pocket money either every day or once a week. So you can tell your child, instead of me giving you this 10 Rand, don't use that whole amount. Save up. Remember, in December, you want to buy yourself toys, or maybe you'd like to buy yourself takeaways. So you can instill that into your children. Teach them to save. Don't use all of the money. Use it when you also only need to, because sometimes kids would still carry money to school, but they do have enough luxuries. They do have enough lunch, which won't be necessary for them to actually use that lunch money that the parents actually gave to them. So you can also inform their children that, I'd rather save this money because you won't need to buy anything with it.
So let's talk about the type of support that is currently available on the market when it comes to dealing with default and debt repayments or dealing with debt. You mentioned financial advisors and the like.
Yes, there are financial advisors. You can also look for one, or some do even call you and ask if they can be your financial advisor, guide you into making financial decisions. Most people do tend to believe that, no, I know how to manage my debt. I know how to manage my. But you won't know that financial advisors are experts in this. They can actually educate you with something that you must have not been aware of. So it is very important. If you find yourself that I do have money, but I do not know what to do with my money, start by appointing a financial advisor, someone who's going to guide you each and every step of the way, encourage you to invest, encourage you to save, encourage you to think of the future. Because at this moment, what most people do, we only think about the situation now and not long term. With all this money that you could have wasted on other expenses, you could have saved for bigger goals. So it's very important for people to have short-term, long-term goals, and then that, okay, I can save for my short-term, I can save for my long-term.
Could this be part of therapy? Because also being in debt can affect somebody emotionally and psychologically in terms of their daily functioning.
Yes, a lot of people get affected mentally because of debt. So many people would find themselves not going to work. So many people find themselves depressed. Payday for some people is not a happy day. It's a day full of emotions. It's a day you wish you can just run away. So if you do find yourself in this situation, as debt counselors, we are there. We are able to assist you and put you in a debt rehabilitation program to assist you in how you can manage and pay your debt. There's always help out there. People just need to seek that assistance. They need to look for that help.
And of course, it's better to have a more proactive approach than to react once the debt has accumulated.
Yes, and avoid yourself from getting into debt cycles, because you would get some financial institutions approaching you. Oh, you do qualify for credit limits increase, you do qualify for a loan, you do qualify for this account, knowing very well that you've already have a lot on your plate. If they do approach you saying you do qualify, it doesn't mean that you must take it out. That's one thing that so many people confuse themselves of. Oh, I can qualify limit. But you're not thinking that you're already swamped financially and you're already in a deep debt crisis and you still want to take on more debt.
Well, Samantha, thanks again for making time for us on this Friday. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
That is Samantha Moyana, who is debt counselor at the National Debt Advisors, talking to us on the line. So much pressure also, I think, when you see people on social media as a young person and you want to live up to this certain life that you can't necessarily afford. And now you end up getting into debt, taking loans.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's actually the way of the world. And consumerism, you switch on the television, all you see is commercials encouraging you to buy stuff. You get on the internet, every second page or every page that you turn to, someone is selling you something. And they have to be more innovative in the way that they lure you in. So being younger and inexperienced, you get caught out very quickly. So I think it's the lenders as well, partly, that are to blame.
Yeah, well, let's get our news headlines. Here is Onele Nzinzi, 7:31 Central African time it is.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. The funeral details of the late former Zambian President Edgar Lungu will be announced in due course. His political party, the Patriotic Front, said in a statement that Lungu had been receiving specialized treatment in South Africa for an undisclosed illness. Legal analyst Melusi Xulu says improved communication channels between South Africa and Malawi could assist in settling the dispute over the attempts to extradite Shepherd Bushiri back to South Africa to stand trial. The fugitive pastor and his wife Mary have approached the Malawian High Court to challenge the ruling that ordered their extradition to South Africa. And White House aides have scheduled a call between President Donald Trump and billionaire Tesla CEO Elon Musk in an effort to broker peace. This comes amid a public feud between the two after Musk stepped down from his role as Trump's advisor. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right, it's time to find out what's happening in the world of sport. Here's Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Peter. We'll start here. So world number one, Aryna Sabalenka, moved a step closer to a maiden French Open title. This after taking out four-time champion Iga Swiatek in a blockbuster semi-final last night. So Sabalenka will meet second seed Coco Gauff in Saturday's showpiece after the American ruthlessly ended French wildcard Louise Boisson's incredible run. So the Belarusian Sabalenka earned a 7-6, 4-6, 6-love victory to end fifth seed Swiatek's 26-match winning streak at the tournament. After a slow start on the Roland Garros clay, Poland's Swiatek fought back to level, but Sabalenka dominated a 22-minute deciding set. Sabalenka, whose 3 Grand Slam titles have all been won on the hard courts, has never reached a Paris final before. Sabalenka had this to say about what it would mean for her to win the French Open title. This is what she had to say.
Well, it's going to mean everything to me and my team because I have to say that almost like the whole life I've been told that clay court is not my thing, and then I didn't have any confidence. And in the past, I don't know how many years we've been able to develop my game so much. So I feel really comfortable on the surface, and I actually enjoy playing on clay. And if I'll be able to get this trophy, it's just gonna mean the world for us. And yeah, I'm ready to go in that final and.
Right, so that final is taking place tomorrow. That is not Iga, but it is Aryna Sabalenka facing off with a Coco Gauff for the title. And then later on today in the men's semi-final, Lorenzo Musetti first up against Carlos Alcaraz on the Philippe Cartier court at 2:30 p.m. Central African time. And then at 7 p.m. Central African time, it's a big one. The world number one, Jannik Sinner, facing off with Novak Djokovic. We all know the story of Novak Djokovic. He's vying to win his 25th Grand Slam title. He'll have to beat Jannik Sinner to make the final of the second Grand Slam tournament of the year. In football news now, Lamine Yamal scored twice as Spain produced a superb display to beat France in a 9-goal thriller and set up a Nations League final with Portugal. The 17-year-old Barcelona forward, one of the contenders to win the Ballon d'Or for the best player in the world this season, helped his side to a 4-0 and then a 5-1 lead in Stuttgart last night. But there was nearly pegged back as France staged a thrilling fight back, scoring 3 times in 11 minutes in a desperate attempt to take the game into extra time. But Spain held on and they will face Portugal in the final in Munich on Sunday, while France will take on Germany in the bronze medal match. Rugby news now. Participation in rugby for girls at school level in South Africa has increased significantly, growing between 15 and 20% from 2023 to 2024. Now, this bodes well for the future of the national side, who are and will be in action at the upcoming Rugby Africa Cup of Nations tournament in Madagascar. The national team prepared for the Africa Cup of Nations in Johannesburg, taking on the men's team from the University of Johannesburg. A number of new players will get the opportunity to showcase their skills as SA Rugby looks to increase the pool of players available for the national selection. Now, Rachel Hanakom, an experienced member of the current squad, has first-hand experience on the rising interest in women's rugby.
It's potentially grown a lot. I see it every day. And even in our provincial competition that we played, like compared to when I first started playing the provincial compared to now, how much more competitive the game is gonna. It's not just you jog onto the field and you know you're gonna win the game. You actually really have to put in the shoulder and fight every single minute of the game.
Onto this now, Indian coach Gautam Gambhir has criticised the decision to host the victory parade where 11 people died on Wednesday and says his heart goes out to those affected. So dozens were also injured outside the M. Chinnaswamy Stadium as the Royal Challengers Bengaluru celebrated their Indian Premier League victory. Now, Karnataka State Chief Minister Siddaramaiah told reporters that authorities had not expected the number of people that had turned out. Now, one police official told the BBC that more than 200,000 people packed the streets to see the team parade through the streets to the stadium, but police expected half of that amount. An official said a stampede occurred when people tried to push through a small gate. On Thursday, the Challengers team said they would give $12,000 to the families of those killed. And finally, in golf news, Rory McIlroy was off the pace at the Canadian Open as he carded a 1 over par 71 in the first round. The Northern Irishman hit 3 birdies, but 4 bogeys in Ontario to trail clubhouse leader Thorbjørn Olesen by 10 shots. Now, Dane Oleson's 9 under par round of 61 included an eagle, 8 birdies as well as a bogey. McIlroy completed a career Grand Slam by winning all majors with victory at the Masters in April. However, he produced a disappointing showing at the US PGA in May, and his struggles continued at the Canadian Open as he prepares for next week's US Open. Elsewhere, Irishman Shane Lowry carded a promising 64 to end the first round on 6 under, while defending champion Robert McIntyre of Scotland as well as England's Danny Willett were further a shot back. It's a wrap from the sports desk at the hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Hi, I'm Tami Ngubeni, anchor of Africa in Business on Channel Africa, bringing you the African perspective.
And I'm Ashraf Garda, host of the National Pulse on SAFM, leading the conversations.
We've joined forces to bring you in-depth, exclusive exclusive G20 developments as we count down to the much-awaited inaugural G20 summit in South Africa, November 2025.
Tune in every Thursday at 16:20 Central African Time as we explore how this first G20 in Africa impacts the continent, from trade and innovation to climate and development.
It's a powerful crossover between Channel Africa and SAFM
as we bring you the G20 through an African lens.
The G20 in Africa.
Global Summit.
An African voice.
Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week.
And now let's get in touch with what's happening in the world of business. Here's Chandugo Ligege with our update.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. South African Agriculture Minister John Steenhuisen says the country should push for meaningful participation of black businesses in the agriculture sector. He says it is unacceptable that so far in the country's democracy, only 10% of farmers are black. Steenhuisen was among cabinet ministers who delivered an address at the Black Business Council Summit in Kempton Park, east of Johannesburg.
It's obviously very important that as the agriculture space, we work with as many stakeholders as possible to ensure growth and opportunity in the agriculture space. If we look at the participation, particularly of black farmers in the large-scale commercial agriculture, pegs it at around 10% on average, obviously much better in some commodity groups and much worse in others. And obviously we need to look at how we can address that imbalance that we have and obviously create and grow the power for more South Africans.
The Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, expects South Africa's economy to grow by 1.3% this year as a weaker global outlook, domestic logistics challenges, and higher borrowing costs persist. The OECD notes that while the country has good growth potential, low public investment and the high cost of doing business is holding back the country's economic growth. Louis Melo of the OECD says South Africa's regulatory system is an impediment to job creation.
Restrictive regulations make it harder for firms to enter the formal market and expand, creating jobs in the process. This is especially true for small and medium-sized enterprises, which employ the lion's share of the labor force in South Africa. Making it easier for firms to obtain licenses and to participate in public procurement are just two examples of areas where regulatory reform could help the performance of labor markets.
Meanwhile, South Africa's Deputy Finance Minister Asho Sarupen says government has noted the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development OECD's recommendations to introduce stricter spending controls, improve governance and administrative efficiency. Speaking at the launch of the OECD's Economic Survey of South Africa in Johannesburg, Sarupen published his recommendation to reform state-owned entities in order to reduce fiscal transfers. He emphasized that government is currently consulting on options for a formal fiscal anchor to prevent the cycle of high spending, large deficits and rising debt.
So we find strong alignment between our reform agenda and the OECD survey's 5 priority recommendations for South Africa, which includes enhancing fiscal sustainability while promoting inclusive growth, maintaining low and stable inflation, expanding job creation and workforce integration, and enabling a just climate transition, and informing the electricity sector. We do note the OECD's recommendation to introduce stricter spending controls, reinforce spending rules, and improve governance.
Brazilian oil and gas company Petrobras aims to make Africa its main region of development outside Brazil. According to the CEO Magda Chambiard, Ivory Coast has shown interest for Petrobras to explore deep and ultra-deep waters off its coast when it gave the company preference in buying 9 offshore exploratory blocks. She added that Nigeria, Angola and Namibia have expressed interest in working with the Brazilian giant. Petrobras is also seeking to explore India's coast, taking part in an upcoming oil block auction scheduled for July. U.S. President Donald Trump has confirmed he has held a telephone call with China's President Xi Jinping on trade between the world's 2 largest economies. Trump says they both extended invitations to visit. Showing Bryce Peace reports.
After a strained relationship that resulted in a trade war between Washington and Beijing, the sentiment now appears positive. President Trump, in a statement, said their respective teams would meet shortly at a location to be announced to advance their trade negotiations. Trump says Xi graciously invited the U.S. first couple to visit China and that he reciprocated, adding that as presidents of two great nations, this was something they both looked forward to. The U.S. president adding that the conversation was almost entirely focused on trade, and nothing concerning Russia, Ukraine, or Iran came up during the 90-minute call. Sherwin Ricepees, SABC News, New York.
$1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 567, Botswana 13 pula 25, Kenya the dollar is 128 shilling 539, Zambia 26 kwacha 6, BRICS countries $1 in Brazil 5 real 61, Russia 78 ruble 64, India 85 rupee 83, China 71 18, South Africa 17 rand 62 cents. $1 is 73 pence to the British pound, 87 to the euro. Commodities: gold is at $3,366, platinum at $1,148 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil $65.12 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 117144459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Right, at 46 minutes past 7 Central African time, we look at what shaped the African markets this week as we speak to Chantal Marx, Head of Investment Research at FNB Wealth and Investments. This is a feature we have on Fridays here on Africa Rise and Shine. Chantal, how are you on this particular Friday, the 6th of June? I think we've just lost Chantal on the line. We're going to try and get a hold of her again as we get into our Markets Fridays. Stay with us on Channel Africa. All right, Chantal is over there now. Chantal, good morning. I was just asking how you're feeling on this Friday.
I'm very cold, but not as cold as I'm going to be next week. Otherwise, everything is going swimmingly.
Really? What's happening next week? You're going somewhere colder than what it is here?
No, there's a cold front coming through to Johannesburg next week.
Oh,
so, yeah.
All right.
Not that exciting.
No, it's not. But we just learn to live with these things, just keeping warm and taking as much vitamin C as we can, right?
Absolutely.
All right, let's get into our markets. Today, we start with shares at Elon Musk's car company Tesla having dropped because of a feud between him and the U.S. President Donald Trump. I don't know if you're surprised by this feud, but let's talk about what this means for Musk's net worth now.
Yes, so it does mean that his net worth comes under pressure. A very large chunk of his capital is tied into his businesses, including Tesla. So it will have a negative impact. I think Tesla, to a large extent, was for a while supported by the fact that he was very close to the US president. Then it became a negative thing because his attention was diverted to DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. The share price rallied when he committed to returning to Tesla on a more or less full-time basis. But now this feud has really rocked the boat. I think a big part of it also is what the feud is about. And it does seem to relate to environmental credits that has really propped up Tesla's profitability over the last few years. If the big beautiful bill, as President Trump has termed it, goes through, some of those benefits that are accruing to kind of EV makers and other renewable energy businesses will no longer be there.
Talking about what the feud is about, we saw it playing it out on social media. With threats and insults going back and forth between the two, where Trump said he could cut Musk's government subsidies and contracts. Tesla and SpaceX have been beneficiaries of these. How much of a negative effect will this have on Elon Musk's companies, Tesla and SpaceX?
So it will have a notably negative effect. I think what counters this to a certain extent is that it's particularly from a Starlink perspective, SpaceX perspective, the government's kind of space program really doesn't have the capacity that is being offered by SpaceX to complement its existing fleet. So I think it's going to be difficult for government to work around that. But we know that Mr. Trump has a short fuse, and he might do something that is outside of the best interest of the economy, just to settle this sort of feud or to use it as a potential negotiation tactic. It does seem, however, that the latest news flow is suggesting that Musk is willing to step back for a cool down period. I think that these two would need to probably sit down and have a rational conversation. Having this play out over social media, I think, just adds to the anxiety of the situation, particularly for Tesla shareholders.
So what are the figures then in terms of the dropping in Tesla in terms of how they've made the amount of money?
So it should be. So for Tesla specifically, it would not be that sizable. It would be, I don't think that their government exposure is that big. If you consider that it's one of the best selling electric vehicles worldwide, their biggest market for their cars are actually China. So I think that they should be more or less insulated. I think with SpaceX, it's a little bit more nuanced, but I don't have exact figures on that. I just know that the impact will be more substantial and quite substantial for SpaceX, but not necessarily for Tesla.
So in the US, Tesla sales had dropped. What do you think the next move should be for Tesla, or should they just focus on their biggest market, which is China, moving forward?
No, so the US is a very important market for Tesla, and they need to continue driving sales there. I think what's happened with Tesla over the last few years is that they have been a little bit slow to roll out new models. Pricing has been under pressure because of broader macroeconomic pressure and heightened competition in the EV space. So I think that they probably need to get back to basics, really push to deliver a product that the consumer wants, that is attractive to the consumer and that competes better with what else is in the market. And this is not only the situation in the US, but even in Europe, you've seen a lot of European consumers prefer kind of European-made electric vehicles and the likes of BYD electric vehicles that come out of China over Tesla. A lot of this, I need to add as well, has to do with the fact that that people aren't comfortable with him being so close to the White House. So perhaps this move away from the White House could be actually a positive thing from a Tesla perspective.
And also, as a result of this dispute between the president and the billionaire businessman, U.S. crude oil prices gained. How were stocks affected?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that these are two unrelated events. But yeah, I mean, the world price has been quite volatile more recently. We saw it come under quite a lot of pressure a few months ago because the global growth outlook had deteriorated owing to these tariff increases that were supposedly going to be pushed through by the US. These tariffs are a lot lower now than what they were at the Liberation Day date. So that's the big announcement that Trump made on the 2nd of April. They're still there, so it's still going to harm global growth, but I think to a lesser impact than what was expected about a month ago. So as a result, we have seen oil prices improve. The oil price is very closely linked, or demand for oil is very closely linked to economic output. So if a smaller deterioration in economic growth is expected, the oil price will gain some support.
How should investors react to this gain?
So I don't think investors should do anything around this oil price gain because it could be short-lived. The reality is that we do have very high supply of oil coming through, particularly from OPEC and more specifically from Saudi Arabia. So that means that supply is very high. We still do see demand coming under pressure because of the tariffs being there just in any event, even though they will be lower. So I think from an investor perspective, it shouldn't really change the medium-term outlook for the oil price at least.
And can we expect the U.S. Federal Reserve to cut rates anytime soon as a result of this?
Well, I think if you do see oil prices remain quite subdued, I would say that will result in less pressure on possible inflation going forward. We have seen inflation being quite well contained in the US. It's still moving lower, but I think inflation risks are also to the upside, and the Fed is in a very difficult position currently because they do foresee a negative impact on inflation from the tariff story. It's going to be very much a US inflation-driven thing. It might be exports to other nations, but it's going to hit the US first. So they're in a very difficult position. They don't want to cut rates and then they have an inflation problem. That said, there's a lot of political pressure on the Fed to cut rates because inflation is still moving lower. So it's a difficult position. I think that they still have room to cut rates. Certainly the US president thinks they do, but it's going to be a 50-50 call, I think.
All right, let's move then to where we are right now. South African, the rand has weakened as GDP has shown stagnation in the first quarter. Where does the rand stand now?
So I don't think that the rand move is necessarily attached to the GDP print. If you look at how the rand reacted relative to other major currencies, there really was no movement following that GDP print. So from that, we can infer that it was more a function of US dollar strength than it was rand weakness. If you actually look at the rand against the US dollar for the last week, it's one of the strongest major currencies against the dollar globally. So it's about the fifth strongest currency against the US dollar over the last week among the 30 biggest currencies globally. So I think that the rand has actually held up very well, considering that we got a really weak growth print. The rand really has been supported by a better political stability locally, as well as the prospect of perhaps lower inflation target that's going to be put in place by the South African Reserve Bank.
How did the government bond do?
So government bonds also haven't shown a lot of movement. It's actually been quite steady. We saw a really nice tick down on government bond yields following the MPC meeting, the Monetary Policy Committee meeting of the South African Reserve Bank last week. And that is also a function of that lower inflation target. If you put a lower inflation target in place, it means that interest rates will be higher in the short term, but that in the long term, those interest rates will actually end up being lower and could result in major savings for government on its interest bill. So a positive reaction there, but from there on out, we haven't really seen dramatic movements on the government bond side.
All right, shifting again to another country, Ghana now. Let's go there, where forecasts made for Ghana's gold production are putting it at a rise of 6.25%. What would this mean for economic recovery in that country?
It's an extremely positive outcome. I think it's very, when I read this story for the first time, it just reminded me how disappointing it is that from a South African perspective, we actually saw gold output decline, because you want to push gold output when the gold price is very high. It's at trading around about record levels, well above $3,000 an ounce. And if you look at the cost profile of most of these gold miners, they produce an ounce of gold at a much lower price, which means that they're earning supernormal profits. This results in higher taxes that go to the fiscus. It can result in a really nice boost to other areas as well, because ultimately these corporate profits go somewhere, and you can also see a boost in something like employment. So I think it's a really positive outcome for Ghana, and hopefully it helps push up economic growth.
Last year's record also showed an increase in gold production. So what is Ghana getting right, and can it sustain it?
So I think that they have newer kind of mines in Ghana relative to the South African story. In South Africa, the gold mines are extremely deep. They're quite mined out. They're very old as well. And in Ghana, you have newer mines utilizing newer technology, and that doesn't require you to mine at very deep levels. Mining very deeply is very inefficient, and it's obviously a safety hazard as well. But I think from Ghana's perspective, the newness of their mining sector, their gold mining sector in particular, is really helping them.
And you mentioned miners. The country implemented regulatory changes within gold mining in order to reduce smuggling. So this forecast, does it change things then for small-scale farmers, miners, in terms of for the better? Because when these regulatory changes were announced, they were feeling quite uncertain.
Yeah, so I think that the regulation is always an issue from a mining perspective. It's usually put in place in order to reduce losses and also to improve safety. But at times it can be quite onerous for mining companies and probably for smaller miners as well. I think that you want kind of certainty of how these things will be implemented as well, so that you can go forward with what you are trying to achieve in that specific mining jurisdiction. I think overall, though, the very high gold price currently should be supportive of gold miners across the board, bar some of them that have just kind of lost the plot a little bit and are mining at extremely high costs. We have a couple of examples down here in South Africa.
Right. Well, thank you again for your time and your very important analysis and insight, Chantal. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Chantal Marx is Head of Investment Research at FNB Wealth and Investments, giving us some gems in terms of our markets on the continent as we wrap Markets Fridays. And it's now 8 o'clock Central African time. We enter the third hour of Africa Rise and Shine. My name is Asanda Beda. Good morning. I'm with my partner.
Peter Ndoro. Yes, indeed. So what are we looking at? Fascinating things in the next half hour. One of the things I'm going to be exploring is this mad relationship that love story between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. I mean,
that
Elon
ended
Musk,
in tears.
Yeah, and it seemed to me long before that it was going to end in tears, because you've got on the one hand a guy, Donald Trump, selling the idea of oil and fossil fuels, and Elon Musk has built his billions on green cars and electric vehicles. So it was going to end in tears, but I think more than anything, the egos are probably the problem.
Yep.
But we'll be unpacking that with an analyst in this half hour.
Let's get our news first. Here's Onele Nsinsi, and then after her is Musibudi Makura with sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. The funeral details of the late former Zambian President Edgar Lungu will be announced in due course. Lungu died yesterday at the age of 68 in Pretoria, South Africa, where he was receiving medical treatment. Lungu led the country from 2015 until losing the 2021 elections to Hakainde Hichilema. Though barred from running again due to term limits, he remained politically active and critical of his successors. Zambian political analyst and historian Dr. Houston Chiputa explains.
Others remember him, of course, on the various infrastructure projects that were implemented, and because of that, many have nostalgic remembrance of President Lungu, and so in the process, we have mixed feelings. Those who remember him as having been someone who did a lot for the country, and those who remember him as having unleashed some form of terror, particularly through the party youths called the cadres, and so it's a mixed grill.
South Africa's Economic Freedom Fighters Party has meanwhile expressed its condolences to the people of Zambia following the death of the country's former president. Lungu rose from humble beginnings on the copper belt to become a lawyer, military officer, and then president between 2015 and 2021. Kailihle Kumalo reports.
The EFF says during his tenure, President Edgar Lungu made significant strides in strengthening Zambia's international relations and promoting unity across political divides. It says Lungu introduced policy initiatives aimed at diversifying Zambia's economy beyond its reliance on copper and appointed Zambia's first female vice president, Inonge Wina. But the EFF adds that the former Zambian leader's time in office was not without criticism. His administration was marked by concerns over rising public debts, the use of emergency powers during times of unrest, and passage of legislation seen as restricting civil liberties.
Political analyst Professor Leseba Tifu says the apartheid government in South Africa's strategy of divide and rule has successively given birth to the government of national unity. Over 50 mainly black-led political parties had registered to contest the national elections, with only 18 of them having made it to the National Assembly. Some of the parties secured funding from rich business people at home and abroad. Professor Tifu says this was a strategic and deliberate move meant to divide the black vote in the May 29 elections last year.
The strategy of divide and rule has been with African politics for a long time. If you really want to manage a black man, find a mechanism to divide them so that they are not united. If you want to extract the mineral resources, sometimes even the intellectual capital of Africa, get them forever divided, because in unity there is strength. And that has been with us for 70 years of our independence. Capitalism thrives where there is instability. Allow me to say, whites are more richer today, more politically emboldened than they were in 1994, because the natives could not unite.
Legal analyst Melusi Xulu says improved communication channels between South Africa and Malawi could help in settling the dispute over the attempt to extradite Shepherd Bushiri back to South Africa to stand trial. The fugitive pastor and his wife Mary have approached the Malawian High Court to challenge the ruling that ordered their extradition to South Africa. In March, the chief resident magistrate in Lilongwe ruled in favor of the National Prosecuting Authority for the couple to face charges in Pretoria. The Bushiris face charges including fraud and money laundering. Olu believes there's a political standoff between the two countries.
There's certain extraditions that we try to do and we fail at them, but also involve the country, which is the requested country, to get the accused back to the country where he's accused of crimes that he has. So what we should do is to involve Malawi in the process. But what I'm sensing from a political standpoint, the Malawian government might not really want to work with the South Africans, because remember when he was first arrested and then he went back to Malawi, there was an interview where a certain minister said, but you are the guys who let the Bushiri escape from the country. So there's this sense that I'm getting that there's no unity when it comes to that.
Lastly, White House aide has scheduled a call between President Donald Trump and billionaire Tesla CEO Elon Musk in an effort to broker peace. This comes amid a public feud between the two after Musk stepped down from his role as Trump's advisor. Musk has backed a call for Trump's impeachment and suggested without evidence that the president appears in government's unreleased files on the late sex offenders Jeffrey Epstein. In response, Trump has threatened to revoke the government's contracts with Musk's companies. Some Americans have these reactions.
It's not going to be something that's just going to get resolved, like swept under the rug. I think it's two egos going at it.
It looks like a lot of petty fighting, a lot of male hubris, just out on display.
I mean, the odds of actually guessing what's going to come next has never been as weird as now. Yeah. I don't think our country's ever experienced this exact circumstances.
Channel Africa News, I'm Onel Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, so the men's semi-finals at the French Open take centre stage. Lorenzo Musetti up against Carlos Alcaraz, while Yannick Sinner will take on Novak Djokovic. Bafana will take on Tanzania in an international friendly match this afternoon at the Peter Mokaba Stadium in the Limpopo province. Details of these and other stories coming up at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
8 minutes past 8 Central African Time it is. Let's get into this story. Zambia's former president Edgar Lungu has died. He died in hospital in South Africa. Lungu ruled the country for 7 years following the death of President Michael Sata, who died in office in 2014, and the elections held in 2015. The former president, who returned back to politics after his retirement when he lost elections in 2021, was being seen as a critical factor in Zambia's political landscape, despite being blocked from contesting again by the courts. Zambian correspondent Arthur Davis Sikopo has more.
He has not been well for some time, and at some point he was denied leaving the country by government when he wanted to seek specialized treatment abroad. Governance and human rights activist Beda Changala recalls.
In fact, he sneaked out of the country because on 2 occasions, if not more, he was blocked from leaving the country for medical attention. He was virtually prisoner without a court order.
But after he left the country for South Africa, Lungu never returned home for about 6 months as he remained in South Africa for treatment till his death Thursday, 5th June 2025. His daughter Tasila at around midday announces the passing of his father and ex-president. His party, the Patriotic Front, gather at the headquarters as they begin their 7 days mourning, presided over by acting president Given Lubinda.
It is true. Edgar Chagwa Lungu is no more. And that mourning will take place here at the Secretariat, and it will take place in all our provincial headquarters, all our district offices, and all our constituency offices. Light fires, congregate, and mourn your beloved leader.
President of Zambia, Hakainde Hichilema, made a Facebook posting mourning Lungu and acknowledging that the family of Lungu had made known of the demise of the former president to government. After his defeat to leading opposition leader then, Hakainde Hichilema, Lungu retired from active politics. But about 2 years down the line, he returned to save his party, the Patriotic Front, which he claimed was being destabilized by the governing party, the United Party for National Development of Hakainde Hichilema.
Therefore, after careful and deep reflection and wide consultation, including prayer, following naked efforts by those in power to annihilate the biggest opposition party PF is under today, the PF, using their stooges and institutions of governance, I have decided to return to active politics.
Mr. Changala, the governance activist, recalls.
And in the last 4 years, he has been humiliated publicly by his predecessor. At every turn that the predecessor is given a microphone, he will go for him. But strangely enough, this is a man who never responded. And when his supporters ask him to hit back, he will always say there was no need.
Lungu will be remembered for massive infrastructure across the country, says Beda Changala.
The humility in this late president was so amazing. But besides that, the 7-year period that he was president, he embarked on massive infrastructure development and unprecedented development which has left a mark as his legacy.
Jackson Slavwe, an opposition leader who worked closely with Lungu in his last days, recounts.
As a person who would give ear to every person, even when the conversation on the table was about him. He was a very humble person. There was a time in a meeting when we suggested that we should be calling each other by our first names or initials, that he was comfortable to be called ECL, but we had to refuse, and we maintained that he should be addressed as His Excellency.
While others praise Lungu, it is on record that some have called him to have run the most corrupt government in Zambia. On the streets, there's some solemn mood, and messages of condolences are coming in from across the world. Zambia has been ruled by 7 presidents, and all the past 6 are now no more. Reporting for Channel Africa in Lusaka, Zambia, I'm Arthur Davis, Scopo.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
US President Donald Trump has expressed his disappointment in billionaire Elon Musk, who's dramatically and publicly opposed a sweeping tax cut and spending bill that's a central cog in the president's domestic agenda. Now, this massive package, which passed the Republican-led House of Representatives by a single vote in May, was dubbed by Trump as his one big, beautiful bill. And this was slammed by Musk in a number of social media posts because it's estimated to increase the federal deficit by trillions of dollars. Trump is now pushing back, and whilst he does that, Musk is responding on social media in real time. Sherwin Bryce-Peace picks up the story for us in New York.
It's a bromance showing signs of decomposition after Musk labelled the sweeping spending legislation, estimated to add trillions of dollars to the country's already seismic debt burden, a disgusting abomination, while threatening Republicans who voted for the legislation with consequences come the midterm elections next year. Listen to President Donald Trump.
I'm very disappointed because Elon knew the inner workings of this bill better than almost anybody sitting here, better than you people. He knew everything about it. He had no problem with it. All of a sudden he had a problem, and he only developed the problem when he found out that we're going to have to cut the EV mandate, because that's billions and billions of dollars, and it really is unfair. We want to have cars of all types. Electric, we want to have electric, but we want to have a gasoline, combustion. We want to have different. We want to have hybrids. We want to have all. We want to be able to sell everything. And when that was cut, and Congress wanted to cut it, he became a little bit different, and I can understand that. But he knew every aspect of this bill. But I'm very disappointed in Elon. I've helped Elon a lot.
Musk responding to a post of the president's statement, calling it false, writing that the bill was never shown to him even once and was passed in the dead of night so fast that almost no one in Congress could even read it. That they should keep the electric vehicle subsidy cuts in the bill, even though no oil and gas subsidies are touched, calling it unfair. Or another Musk response on X saying that without him, Trump would have lost the election and that Democrats would control the House of Representatives. Or this post simply saying, such ingratitude, after spending over $250 million to help Trump and Republicans win control of the government in last year's election. It was just 6 days earlier at Musk's exit press conference from the federal government and his role leading the Department of Government Efficiency that the South African-born billionaire had this to say.
I think the Doge team is doing an incredible job. They're going to continue doing an incredible job, and I'll continue to be visiting here and be a friend and advisor to the president.
Trump at times seemed confused about the shift he's now seeing in Musk.
You saw a man who was very happy when he stood behind the Oval desk. And even with the black eye, I said, do you want a little makeup? We'll get you a little makeup. But he said, no, I don't think so, which is interesting and very nice. He wants to be who he is, so you could make that statement too, I guess. Look, Elon and I had a great relationship. I don't know if we're well anymore. I was surprised because you were here. Everybody in this room practically was here as we had a wonderful send-off. He said wonderful things about me. You couldn't have nicer, said the best things. He's worn the hat. Trump was right about everything. And I am right about the great, big, beautiful bill.
He later threatened Musk with this on Truth Social. Quote, the easiest way to save money in our budget, billions and billions of dollars, is to terminate Elon's government subsidies and contracts. I was always surprised that Biden didn't do it, wrote President Trump. Musk responding on X that it was time to drop a really big bomb, that President Trump was in the Epstein files, and that this was the real reason they had not been made public, ending with, have a nice day, DJT. Or like he said in this 2021 interview,
we're running this incredible deficit. Someone's got to give. I don't know. This can't keep going.
The most powerful man in the world versus the richest man in the world, who is now using his social media leverage to counter a president and a party he was fully in support of just months ago, in what could develop into a dramatic political public feud. Musk also jokingly called himself the first buddy and was a regular feature in the president's orbit. But he is now fully against the passage of Trump's signature tax cut legislation that he believes will simply balloon the country's deficit, warning that America would go bankrupt. And, as things currently stand, a personal relationship that might be heading in the same direction. I'm Sherwin Bryce-Pease in New York.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Well, as we've just seen in that report, tensions are flaring between two of America's most high-profile figures, former President Donald Trump and billionaire tech mogul Elon Musk. Trump, never one to back down, has hit back sharply, triggering an ongoing war of words that's playing out online and in real time. So to unpack what this public spat reveals about power, influence, and the state of American politics, we're joined now by Professor Christopher Isike, who's a director at the African Center for the Study of United States at the University of Pretoria. Prof, thanks very much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Peter, and thank you for having me.
So what do you make of this very public clash between Donald Trump and Elon Musk?
Well, I'm not surprised, and I'm sure most people are not. I actually predicted it in January when I was asked about this bromance, that it was not going to last very long, precisely because of the fact that these are two personalities that are exactly the same. They are both capricious, they are vengeful, very, rich people with big egos, right? So, and they will stop at nothing. They will stop at nothing to get what they want. So, I think this would be Trump's biggest test in terms of pushback from anyone. And in this case, it's going to be pretty ugly for him because Elon Musk also has his own social media, which he can use to actually prosecute this war of words, social media war between the richest man on earth, as well as probably the most politically strong person in the world.
That last line that you've got this political power on the one side and economic power on the other, what does that tell us about the situation the United States finds itself in between business and politics?
Yeah, look, it's always been there historically and everywhere else in the world. The connection between business and power, politics is always been something that people are frowned about because it raises questions around who's really in charge and whose policies win at the end of the day, right? So that political economy needs to be studied more carefully. In this instance, though, you have two, like we said, powerful individuals, very egoistic, mercurial in their nature, that are clashing and want their interest to be top stage, and now that there's a falling out, because many people do not understand what Elon Musk wanted to get from all of this, right? He invested almost $300 million to get President Trump elected and promised to save government spending by $1 trillion. At the end of the 130 days period, he was only able to save about 175 million. And many will say, well, he didn't achieve what he went there to achieve, but that's on the face of it. There are several benefits from government that he gets, and you've heard from what Sharon was saying about Trump's response to cut some of the government contract he has. So he's protected those, plus the fact that many he was facing a lot of litigation, a lot of blocks from the U.S. government. He was able to, through Doge, deal with all of those. So pretty much he has achieved what he personally went there to achieve. But now again, goes back to their egos. All of those can come off with Trump now threatening to cut off his contracts from government.
So what we know for sure in America, to get elected, you need money. And so Elon Musk for sure assisted Donald Trump to get to the Oval Office. Is the reverse true, though? Could the same money be a problem for Donald Trump's political reign going forward?
Well, look, I don't think so. It's debatable whether Elon Musk actually got Trump elected, right? Surely he helped. His money really helped in many ways. But there's a chance that Trump could have still won the election, given the antagonism against the Democrat Party, especially with Mr. Biden and the economy at that time. Can Trump? Will Trump have money problems? I doubt. He's made quite a lot of money, and since he became president, and he has new friends who also have money. You recall the tech giants that are now behind him, big business fully behind him. So all of them will be willing to chip in. But it raises questions around campaign financing and how much, it should be regulated to prevent this kind of situation. Interestingly, though, I must say, oftentimes business normally influence political leaders. In Mr. Trump's case, because he's a maverick, it's been hard for any single factor or individual or force to actually influence him, and that's why I was not surprised that this is happening now, because Mr. Trump has never proved to be completely loyal to anyone, just because of his nature. So he's kind of come out different from most political leaders that are influenced by big money, and I'm sure that because of his character and the way he has done things, he would get people to easily replace the influence that the money influence of Musk in his administration going forward.
Will this have an effect on the Republican Party itself? And Donald Trump has been a huge disruptor on Republican traditions and way of doing things. Elon Musk coming into this feud with Donald Trump, it may embolden some other business people, I wonder, and Republicans in general. What are your thoughts?
Well, maybe not business people, but maybe some Republicans, especially in the Senate. Elon Musk has spoken directly, called out the Senate directly to try and make sure they don't pass this bill. Many of them oppose it secretly. Yes, you are right that this will embolden some of them, especially now that Elon Musk is talking about an alternative party and he has the funding to do so. He helped to elect some of the House of Representatives and Senate members, and he's threatened that he would ensure that some of them don't get re-elected if they vote for this bill. So there could be effect here and there. The issue though is that Trump remains very strong. He's very unpredictable. He's survived worse things. Just talking about the Epstein files, for instance, I don't think that's going to damage him in any way, right? Because of the kind of things that he has survived, from January 6th to the court cases he had. So I don't think that this will affect his fortune personally, but like you said, if you Republicans, especially those in power now, could be emboldened to push back on the bill and take the risk of getting primaried and hope that Elon Musk can bail them in terms of money.
Some people might say, why should we be interested in this feud sitting all the way here in Africa? Your thoughts? Is this something we should be paying attention to?
Oh, absolutely. Whatever deal President Ramaphosa may have struck with Elon Musk in the Oval Office meeting can be at risk now for Elon Musk, because the reason why South Africa may have counter to him in the first place was because of the influence of Mr. Trump. So if that is now off, it means South Africa can stand a bit stronger in resisting some of his overtures with his Starlink, and I'm sure the same thing applies to the rest of the continent.
I would imagine businesses also concerned. I mean, Elon Musk's Tesla company lost 14% value on the stock exchange, which means the stock exchange is taking a hit because of the size of this particular share itself. They can't be happy. Business can't be happy for this kind of uncertainty to be playing out, because cancelling contracts, that kind of thing, doesn't leave one feeling comfortable in the economic space there.
No, it doesn't. And this is one of the reasons why some people have argued that Musk would be the greatest losers at the end of the day, because of the amount of influence that Trump can bring to bear on his businesses. He's also threatening to cut or terminate, SpaceX and what they are doing for the Department of Defense. He's saying that he's going to be back to spending a lot of time with his companies focused on X, AI, and Tesla, including the Starship launch, which is happening about now. But like you said, yes, there's the economic fallout of all of these, because these inconsistencies, these troubles, if you can call them that, impacts on the bottom line and investor confidence. And I'm sure even his shareholders are not happy. So we will see a lot of turbulence in the coming weeks. And depending on how this goes, if it is handled very quickly between both parties, things can cool down a bit. Otherwise, it will just be a downward spiral for Musk and his businesses and the impact that this will have for them all over the world.
Professor Ike, we're going to have to leave it there. It's always great talking to you. Thanks so much indeed for your time.
Thank you, Peter.
All right, that was Professor Christopher Isike, who's the director at the African Center for Study of the United States at the University of Pretoria. And this is certainly an issue, sadly, we cannot ignore. Elon Musk, arguably the most powerful business person on the planet, versus someone who's also regarded as the most powerful in politics. How will this one end? You know what they say, when two elephants fight, who is it that suffers? It's 8:30, which means it's time for your news headlines. Here's Onele Nsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. A close ally of the late former Zambian President Edgar Lungu has described him as a true patriot who embraced everyone, including those who acted against him. Lungu led the country from 2015 to 2021 as the Patriotic Front party leader. He died yesterday at a medical facility in South Africa, Pretoria. The Central African nation of Chad says it is suspending all visas to U.S. citizens as a matter of reciprocity after learning that it is one of a dozen countries, mostly African, whose nationals are banned from traveling to the U.S. And police in Brazil have questioned the former President Jair Bolsonaro as part of an inquiry into his son's campaign for the U.S. to impose sanctions on a Brazilian Supreme Court judge. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Nsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's find out what's happening in the world of sports. Now here's Musibudi Makura with our details.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Asanda. Very good morning from the Sports Desk. So the final time this morning on Africa Rise and Shine. We'll start with football news. So Banyana creative midfielder Lenda Motlalo believes they have the capacity to defend their WAFCON crown in July. This follows South Africa clinching the COSAFA 3 Nations Series Cup. This after two convincing wins over both Botswana as well as Zambia on home soil. Motlalo is adamant that the players and the technical team fully understand what needs to be done to retain the title in Morocco.
WAFCON is just around the corner, and obviously, yes, we do feel the pressure, but I always say that pressure is privilege, and yes, we go in there as title contenders. So getting there, we know it's not going to be easy. We're just going to do our work, we're not going to put ourselves under pressure. We're just going to do what needs to be done.
All right, so Banyana managed a 3-2 win over Botswana in the 3 Nations Series opener. That was followed by a convincing 2-0 win over Zambia in their final match on Tuesday. Motlalo shares her analysis of those two matches.
Botswana and Zambia, they play different football. But what I've learned mostly about Zambia is that now they try to play. They no longer depend on their fast strikers, which is good to see. But as Banyana, I think we managed, analyzing them, we managed to play a game and avoid for them to play those passes that they're trying to play. And as for Botswana also, they They never used to press us, but like now they are. It shows that they're no longer scared of us, which is a good thing.
On to some tennis news now. World number one Aryna Sabalenka moved a step closer to a maiden French Open title by taking out four-time champion Iga Swiatek in a blockbuster semi-final last night. Sabalenka will meet second seed Coco Gauff in Saturday's final after the American ruthlessly ended French wildcard Louise Boisson's incredible run. Now, the Belarusian Sabalenka earned a 7-6, 4-6, 6-love victory to end fifth seed Swiatek's 26-match winning run at the tournament. After a slow start on the Roland Garros clay, Poland's Swiatek fought back to level, but Sabalenka dominated a 22-minute deciding set. Sabalenka, whose three-time Grand Slam titles have all come on the hard courts, has never reached a final in Paris before. This is what she had to say about what it would mean for her to finally win a French Open title.
Well, it's going to mean everything to me and my team because I have to say that almost like the whole life I've been told that clay court is not my thing, and I didn't have any confidence. And in the past, I don't know how many years, we've been able to develop my game so much. So I feel really comfortable on the surface, and I actually enjoy playing on clay. And if I'll be able to get this trophy, it's just gonna mean the world for us. And yeah, I'm ready to go in that final. And
meanwhile, Gauff, runner-up to Swiatek in 2022, won 6-1, 6-2 against the world number 361 Boisson, who was appearing in her first-ever Grand Slam main draw. Despite having the backing of the crowd on court Philippe Cartrier, the energy provided was not enough to compensate for Boisson's lack of quality. Gauff dominated the rallies, breaking her opponent's serve 6 times before wrapping up the victory in just 1 hour and 9 minutes. Gauff is happy to be in yet another French Open final.
Yeah, it definitely will help me. I was super nervous going into that final. Obviously, I'm playing Aryna. It's going to be a tough match, but overall, I think I'm just really proud of myself. And yeah, there's still a lot more work to do, but I'm just going to enjoy this one, and then tomorrow I'll start the preparation for the final.
And finally, Rory McIlroy was off the pace at the Canadian Open as he carded a 1 over par 71 in the first round. The Northern Irishman hit 3 birdies but 4 bogeys in Ontario to trail clubhouse leader Thorben Olesen by 10 shots. Now, Dane Olesen's 9 under par round of 61 included an eagle, 8 birdies as well as a bogey. McIlroy completed a career Grand Slam of winning all of the majors with a victory at the Masters in April. However, he produced a disappointing showing at the USPGA in May, and his struggles continued at the Canadian Open as he prepares for next week's US Open. Elsewhere, Irishman Shane Lowry carded a promising 64 to end the first round on 6 under par, while defending champion Robert McIntyre of Scotland, as well as England's Danny Willett, were further shot back. It's 8:36 a.m. Central African Time, and concludes your sports news this morning on Africa Rise and Shine. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Hi, I'm Tami Ngubeni, anchor of Africa in Business on Channel Africa, bringing you the African Perspective.
And I'm Ashraf Garda, host of the National Pulse on SAFM, leading the conversation.
We've joined forces to bring you in-depth, exclusive G20 developments as we count down to the much-awaited inaugural G20 Summit in South Africa, November 2025.
Tune in every Thursday at 16:20 Central African Time as we explore how this first G20 in Africa impacts the continent, from trade and innovation to climate and development.
It's a powerful crossover between Channel Africa and SAFM
as we bring you the G20 through an African lens.
The G20 in Africa
Global Summit.
An African voice.
Tune in and turn up the volume. This is Channel Africa.
And for a final business news update on Rise and Shine, here is Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. The Ministry of Trade and Industry in Lesotho is conducting a nationwide awareness campaign on its recently revived Insolvency Act of 2022. It says this act aims to provide for an efficient rescue and discovery of financially distressed companies and individuals in a manner that balances the rights and interests of all stakeholders. Rapelang Khadebe has more.
Many businesses and individuals find themselves in distress and often not fully informed of alternative rescue measures or procedures to follow should they need to wind down operations. The Ministry of Trade says seeking professional help early balances interests of all stakeholders involved.
South African Agriculture Minister John Steenhuisen says the country should push for meaningful participation of black businesses in the agriculture sector. He says it is unacceptable that so far in the country's democracy, only 10% of farmers are black. Steenhuisen was among cabinet ministers who delivered an address at the Black Business Council Summit in Kempton Park, east of Johannesburg.
It's obviously very important that as the agriculture space, we work with as many stakeholders as possible to ensure growth and opportunity in the agriculture space. If we look at the participation, particularly of black farmers in the large-scale commercial agriculture, pegs it at around 10% on average, obviously much better in some commodity groups and much worse in others. And obviously we need to look at how we can address that imbalance that we have and obviously create and grow the power for more South Africans.
South African fashion retailer Mr. Price reported a 10.1% increase in full-year earnings, supported by strong second-half performance amid improved sales growth and reduced markdowns. Diluted headline earnings per share, a key profit measure in South Africa, rose to 13.79 rand, while operating profit grew 8.9% to $327 million in the 52-week period ended on the 29th of March. Mauritius aims to have its budget deficit to 4.9% of gross domestic product in the fiscal year that starts in July. Prime Minister Nevin Ramgoolam says urgent changes are needed to improve the health of public finances. Ramgoolam, who was elected in November, accuses the previous government of falsifying the country's GDP, budget deficit and debt figures for years. Joeli Hodi has more.
Ramgoolam kept the Finance Ministry portfolio for himself to keep a close watch over the Indian Ocean Archipelago's economy. Budget documents showed overall spending was expected to rise to $5.8 billion in the upcoming fiscal year from a revised $5,431 in 2024-2025. Revenue was projected to increase to $4,828 from $3,982. The government's borrowing requirement is seen falling to about $862 million.
Brazilian oil and gas company Petrobras aims to make Africa its main region of development outside Brazil. According to the CEO Magda Chambiard, Ivory Coast has shown interest for Petrobras to explore deep and ultra-deep waters off its coast when it gave the company preference in buying 9 offshore exploratory blocks. She added that Nigeria, Angola and Namibia have expressed interest in working with the Brazilian giant. Petrobras is also seeking to explore India's coast, taking part in an upcoming oil block auction scheduled for July. Let's have a look at financial indicators this morning. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 567. In Botswana, 13.25. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 539. Zambia, 26 kwacha 6. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 61. Russia, 78 ruble 64. India, 85 rupee 83. China 71.18, South Africa 17 rand 62 cents. $1 is 73 pence to the British pound and 87 to the euro. Commodities: gold is at $3,368, platinum at $1,150 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil at $65.15 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 117144459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África, com Moreno Samo e João Yabalá.
O surto da cólera em Angola tem causado grande preocupação, afetando já mais de metade das províncias do país. Simultaneamente, a Agência dos Estados Unidos para o Desenvolvimento Internacional, USAID, um dos maiores doadores mundiais de assistência humanitária, decidiu não priorizar os países com maior incidência de malária. Para discutirmos as causas do alastramento da cólera em Angola e os impactos dessa decisão da USAID, convidamos o Dr. Jeremias Agostinho, médico e mestre em saúde pública, para partilhar a sua visão sobre o tema.
A doença, nesse momento, representa o maior risco de saúde pública que nós temos. Nos últimos anos, a nossa preocupação esteve sempre centrado com os casos de malária, os casos de tuberculose e também de infecção por VIH-Sida. A forma como, em pouco menos de 2 meses, os casos de cólera vêm aumentando, acaba por representar, nessa altura, um dos maiores desafios que o país tem. É expectável que, nesta fase, o número de casos venha a aumentar.
De segunda a sexta-feira, das 20 às 21 horas locais, este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África.
Je, una jambo lolote akilini mwako? Je, una shauku kuhusu masuala muhimu? Na je, una maoni ambayo unataka yasikike? Kweli, hili jukwaa ni la kwako. Piga simu au tuandikie kwenda WhatsApp namba alama ya kujumulisha 2760552594 na tutakupigia simu.
Mtangazaji wa habari zetu za Afrika Kusini mjini Johannesburg.
Hivyo unaweza kuwa mshirika kwenye matangazo yetu. Sio mazungumzo tu, ni fursa yako ya kuchangia maoni yako na kushirikiana na jumuiya ya wasikilizaji wanaotamani mtazamo wako. Tufuate kwenye mitandao ya kijamii. Tembelea tovuti yetu www.channelafrica.co.za na uwe tayari kushiriki na kuchangia maoni yako kwenye Channel Africa. Channel Africa, mtazamo wa Kiafrika.
A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
8:45 Central African Time it is, in a strong call to action marking World Environment Day 2025. South Africa's Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, Dr. Deon George, launched the country's first coastal climate change adaptation response plan in Pretoria. Addressing delegates, the minister emphasized that climate change is a global crisis with daily severe impacts, especially along coastal regions where nearly half the world's population lives. Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe found this report.
The launch coincided with this year's World Environment Day commemorations, marked annually on 5th June since 1973, a vital platform for encouraging worldwide awareness and action for the protection of the environment. South Africa's Ministry of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, under the stewardship of its Minister Deon George, officially launched South Africa's inaugural Climate Change Coastal Adaptation Response Plan. South Africa is adopting a balanced, multi-pronged approach to climate change, responding to rising pressures on coastal areas, home to nearly half the global population, with urgent action to protect both people and the environment. Minister George said climate change has become a crisis.
Climate change is a global crisis, and it impacts intensely, daily, particularly along the world's coasts, where nearly half the global population resides. Migration patterns suggest this concentration will only increase, further amplifying pressure on coastal environments. As a country, we are taking a multifaceted approach to tackling climate change, balancing our development needs with our environmental responsibilities. Our coastline or coastal cities are at the front line of climate change, facing severe and multifaceted complexities that threaten livelihoods, communities, economies, infrastructure, and ecosystems.
The launch signaled South Africa's bold step to respond to climate crises.
To strengthen our country's response to climate-related coastal risks, the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment developed the Climate Change Coastal Adaptation Response Plan for South Africa's coastal sector. This plan provides a strategic framework to guide national, provincial and local government efforts in building coastal resilience. It identifies key vulnerabilities, outlines priority adaptation action, and promotes an integrated, ecosystem-based approach to managing climate risks. The plan emphasizes the importance of protecting coastal communities, infrastructure, and nature systems through proactive planning, risk-improved development, and collaborative governance.
Minister George reminded delegates of the importance of the UN Sustainable Development Goals.
The Sustainable Development Goals represent the United Nations Development Programme's global call to action to end poverty and inequality, protect the planet, and ensure peace and prosperity for all by 2030.
Dr. Dion George, South Africa's Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, talking about World Environment Day 2025 in conversation with Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe. Another feature unique to Fridays is RT Beat, and this is where we take a look at what's happening in the world of the arts and get a filing from our Channel Africa reporter, Tlanta Mahlangu. So let's see what she has for us this week.
Welcome to this week's African RT Beats exclusive to Channel Africa, The African Perspective. I am Tlanta Mahlangu. In this week's segment, critically acclaimed South African musical Sarafina is back on stage, and Zimbabwe launches its first Pan-African e-commerce fashion platform.
Freedom is coming tomorrow.
The critically acclaimed musical Sarafina is showcasing at the Joburg Theatre in Johannesburg, South Africa. This powerful, renowned production, celebrated for its powerful storytelling and vibrant performances, is directed by Mpho Lepo with choreography by Mpumelele Gumede Ngema. The show will run until the 15th of June 2025. This iconic musical was originally conceived and directed by the renowned Dr. Mbongeni Ngema. More from director Mpho Lepo.
It's been this stage as part of an honor of the late Dr. Mbongeni Ngema, but also the Civic Theatre was opening a memorial, like a star sign with his name in front of the theatre as part of honoring the great work that he has done. And then Sarafina became one of the projects and product of his that was given an opportunity to be received. But in terms of how I came in, it was through the theatre that I think in their meetings, wherever they were meeting, they then opted that a person who could facilitate the process could be in Mpho Lepo. And for that, I really feel honored and humbled by that.
So what can those who will be attending the show look forward to?
Remember, when you redo a production that has been done so many times, it's quite a challenging process, and you constantly look into how do you really make it more fresh, how do you make it more relevant and all of that. But I think we took a decision that we're not going to tamper with the script because it's a historical script, and the story is very historical to the country and to the youth, and we're not going to make any changes to it. But I think in terms of the artistic presentation, we will try and enhance some of the performances, looking at the dances, looking at some of the images we could be able to create just to enhance the performance. And I think on that note, we really did our part to make it fresh and new and try to link it with the present.
And just how significant is the storyline to the history of South Africa?
I always hear a lot of people saying Sarafina is about 1976, but I think it's about 1986. It's about 76, it's about 86. But generally, I think Sarafina is about youth. It's about young people at a particular point faced with challenges and trying their best to change the status quo. So for me, it's applicable at any time. It's not even just about 76 and 86, but it's just a call for youth to action. When youth realizes that their status quo or the material conditions around them is affecting how they live, they need to stand up and change it. And I guess even if we look at the history of South Africa in terms of politics, it has always been young people who've been in the forefront trying to change the status. And I think for me, the underlying and the big message about the production is just a call for youth to always seize a moment and change their material conditions.
And tell us more about the cast. Where is the cast drawn from?
We didn't want to say youth from Wetu or youth from Alexandra or wherever, but the Joburg Theatre did an open call, and so many young people came through, and we did the auditions, and then we selected those that we felt had the ability to can work with us in a very short space of time to be able to restage the productions. I mean, the talent in the country is massive. And we saw so many young people, and finally we ended with the 35 that we have. I think they came from different provinces. I mean, in the cast we have someone from Mpumalanga, and like I'm not mistaken, we do have also other provinces. But there were quite a lot that flew in from Cape Town, from everywhere. There were quite a lot of young people that came from all over. I think Sarafina in a South African context is one of the biggest musicals and a big stepping stone for young people who are performers and who are what we call the triple threat, who can sing, dance, and act.
And are there plans to take it around the country?
Even as a director, I can only have a wish that the production should not end here. I feel strongly that if it was possible and if I had the capability and the financial muscle, I will take it to the 9 provinces. But I think that depends on producers and depends on who approaches the theatre and asks for it in their own respective provinces. But I think the project itself is meant to be seen by young people because it appeals to the youth.
The Huno Council of Fashion has launched Zimbabwe's first Pan-African e-commerce fashion platform, Huno Collective. This groundbreaking digital marketplace connects global consumers to ethnically made fashion, accessories, and beauty products crafted by Zimbabwean and Pan-African designers, marking a bold new chapter in African fashion and commerce. It's a movement rooted in cultural storytelling, sustainability, and the spirit of collective identity. Some of the featured brands include Shashiko from Zimbabwe and Shita Design from Botswana, amongst others. That's it from this week's African RT Beats. Until next Friday for Channel Africa, I am Ntlanhla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
It is time to find out. Yes, from Palesa. Good to have you back, because you were not well this week, hey?
Yes.
Everyone's had this flu thing going around. It's crazy. I've recovered now, thankfully.
So
Are
terrible.
you feeling better?
Slightly, but I'm not fully recovered yet.
Okay.
I'm here though, so
Your voice sounds great.
Yeah,
so
it sounds much better than it did on Wednesday.
What's happening on the move?
All right, today on the Move, it's a Friday. We focus on the creative world and industries, and a lot of artists have focused into turning their skills into entrepreneurship. But unfortunately, many of them don't have the entrepreneurial skills to carry it through. So we'll be speaking to Gail Bosch, an art insure product head at I2 Special Risks, who says that overcoming these challenges involves learning business skills, setting clear goals, and seeking mentorship or professional advice. We're speaking about entrepreneurship and how to invest into your business. If you're an artist, in the first hour of today's show. In the second hour, taking a look at the First Thursdays on Love Day program, which is quite a really popular program here in Johannesburg that happens every first Thursdays, usually in Rosebank. They have a groundbreaking group exhibition that's just opened at the Weed Loves Market in Marshalltown, Johannesburg, finding out a little bit more about this exhibition titled Past, Present and Future. And then in the final hour of today's show, of course, it's time for our artists. We'll be speaking to South African singer and songwriter Buleng Phofolo.
Okay, what genre of music is she in?
She does, well, I'm not sure. Well, it says there's tranquil music, so it must be along the lines of R&B and Afro pop.
Yeah, maybe
soul.
Okay,
that's so nice, because it's nice to hear that it's not an Afro pop for a change, because everybody just
goes the Afro pop route.
I still listen to old school. I'm still stuck in
old
the
school
past,
music is just so beautiful.
And it was music. Nowadays, I'm not so sure, but maybe
look, it's still music. And remember, today's music will one day be old school music to today's generation that enjoy it.
Although I think our era, my age, has survived longer than the things that came after us.
It has survived quite long, yes.
I mean, what was Kwaito was a big thing at one stage. I don't know what's happened to Kwaito.
But it still hits. I mean, if you listen to Kwaito today,
into Amapiano, but you can send some Amapiano songs have a foundation of Kwaito.
Whereas you can
or a bit of house. They've mixed it now, but it's still there.
You can still listen to the Commodores. You can still listen to George Benson, man.
And then people sample those ones, huh? They like to sample those ones.
Or, in fact, a lot of today's music is sampled from some old school music.
And my daughter was always amazed. How do you know that song? And I'm like,
oh, it's ours. I do that with my son all the time. I'm like, okay, he listens to a song that's just gone in. I'm just like, okay, hang on, let me play you something. And then I play him the original. I'm like, you see, you guys are always stealing our songs.
Yeah, and then I get so confused with the music awards. I never know the faces now. I don't even watch them anymore. The Grammys, even the South African Music Awards, I think I'll know like three artists.
I think he was just saying we're old and it's okay.
Saying goodbye. Thank you so much for joining us this entire week. Let's do it again starting Monday, 6 a.m. Central African Time. From me, Ndoro.
And me, Asanda Beda. Goodbye from us. Have a great weekend.
The news is next with Onel Nsinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Looking at your top stories, 2 more army posts attacked in jihadist violence in Mali, and Brazil police bring in former President Jair Bolsonaro for questioning. Your latest news. Greetings to our